Good evening, everyone. It's now 6 o'clock, so we will be calling this June 15th, 2026 meeting of the Acton Select Board to order. And our first item of business is resident concerns. Folks in the audience, either here or virtually, can speak for up to 3 minutes on any topic that's not on the agenda. You typically will not get a response from the board at this time, because if it's not on the agenda, we should not be discussing it. So if anybody has public comment, come on up and please share your name and your address for the record.
Hi folks, Glenn Cody, School Committee, 77 Strawberry Hill Road. It's been a bit, but I'm just happy to give an update on what we've been up to on School Committee recently. June has and continues to be a busy month for us. There were business meetings on June 4th and 11th, and there will be a workshop this Thursday, the 18th. On June 4th, that was the first meeting with our new Boxborough members. Welcome aboard. Andy and Hillary, now officially seated and serving. We're lucky to have them. During that same meeting, the committee reorganized our leadership structure. Tori was reelected as chair. Adam continues to serve as the Boxborough vice chair, and Lisa is now the Acton vice chair. Enrollment and transportation policy changes, which have been a topic of discussion. That is now officially adopted, resulting from the conclusion of AB Forward. A lot of thought and intention went into that, and then we're now moving into the implementation stage. We've had open houses at the elementary schools to help give our students an opportunity to explore the new spaces, see some new faces, and recognize familiar peers that they all may already know. It's a transition, but we're doing what we can to support them. Finally, the search for the new superintendent has begun. Search firm, the Collins Center, we've selected them via vote on school committee to assist the district with the task of finding talented candidates. And so that's the Collins Center, that's the organization that's going to be helping us with that. And then the Superintendent Search Committee, which will provide recommendations to the full committee later down the road. They'll begin working shortly with the Collins Center, and parents, I want to stress this, can expect robust and accessible opportunities for public engagement in the very near future. So please reach out. Our school committee shell, email shell is the best way to reach us. And as always, the website is the most accurate source of information. Stuff flies around on social media, but let's keep it. Don't throw so much stuff around on Facebook. I say that with grace and kindness to the community. Our website is the most accessible and accurate source of information. All right, thanks so much. Reach out with any questions.
Thank you. Are there other folks in the room with resident concerns or anybody online? Okay. All right, thank you. I have a brief update, which is just a list of upcoming events. June for the town of Acton is also a busy time. Tomorrow evening at Nara Park, there will be an emergency preparedness fair. I mentioned this last meeting from 5 to 7. It is family friendly. We encourage you to come on out. On Wednesday, right here in this room at 6 o'clock, there is a Great Road Safety Improvements public hearing that will be hosted by Mass Department of Transportation. On Thursday, again in this room at 7 o'clock, there will be a public forum, Central Street, Complete Streets. And on June 24th at 6 p.m. at the Concord Middle School Auditorium, there will be a public forum on the Concord Rotary improvements. At Nara Park on June 27th, we'll be holding our annual Pride Fest from 12 to 3, another family-friendly event. And that same day, in the evening, is the date of the Great American Campout. So starting at 5 o'clock that evening and going until 9 a.m. the next morning. And you can register on the town's website. And now to the manager for manager's update.
Good evening. Just a few things. First, at the November 2025 meeting, the Select Board approved a support letter to establish a foreign trade zone here in Acton. It's a complicated process that involves the federal government and the state government through Mass DOT, but I'm pleased to report that Methods Machine Company had their initial submission successfully approved and now working on some site improvements, which will be used, make them eligible to establish a foreign trade zone according with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So they're looking at August for this to be in effect, and we'll let you know then. I'm not sure if you do a ribbon cutting for a foreign trade zone or you just let them do business. I think that'll probably be the latter. I also wanted to recognize that our Council on Aging and Senior Center is having a few longtime, very valuable employees retire this week or this month. One is Sharon Mercurio, our director. She's retiring after 16 years. And the other is Beverly Hutchins, who's the assistant director, and she's retiring after 3 decades of service to the town. So a big part of the senior center and a big part of the community and the organization. And so we're working on a transition plan for staffing, but I just wanted to mention them and thank them for their service. They both did a lot for the community. There were several concerns at the last meeting about Old Village Road, which is a road just up the street here. And I just wanted to let you know that I responded to the residents that were here and maybe some that weren't, to let them know that that roadway isn't really very high at all on the list of priority paving. And so, and we use pavement condition studies and other analysis to determine which roads get repaved first, and they're not up on the list or even close, so that probably isn't good news for them. But we are going to take a look at what we can do in the short term, whether it's repaving or repatching a very small section that's in the worst shape. So we'll continue to be in touch with them. I just wanted to brief the board on that. Another update, Public Works related, is that the town of Concord started a culvert replacement project on the Spencer Brook Road culvert, and they're detouring a little bit through town on Pope Road. Shouldn't really be an issue. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. It's going to be about a month or two. We got a donation from Kelly Sabins. She was working with her parents to clean out their house, and she found a pin that she thought we would like from the 60s and 70s from the town of Acton. So I just wanted to thank her for sending it to us. It says Crown Resistance Day, Acton, Mass. Maybe people remember when we were handing out these pins. So I just wanted to thank her for that. We promoted John Garside. He's now our new building commissioner. I wanted to make sure that the public knew that. And Justin Flynn is our assistant IT director. Two promotions that we're proud of. They worked hard and they're going to continue to contribute in a new level. I also want to mention that Select Board Member David Martin was recently elected as the chair of the Magic Subregion for MAPC. So he'll help us get even more money from state and federal grants.
Thank you. Any member minutes? David, I'm sorry, Dean?
Thank you. The Acton 250 committee is fast running out its string. We had a good event at the Acton Center Congregational Church yesterday. A theater play declaring independence then and now was well received. We had about 80 in the audience. Upcoming events, Thursday, June 25th, 7 p.m., we have an author talk. When the Declaration of Independence was news, the author is Emily Sneff, PhD, who will be giving that talk. And on Saturday, June 27th at 11 a.m., we have a historian talk, The History of East Acton. That will also be at the Acton Memorial Library. Check the town website for more details of those events. That pretty much wraps up the public engagement programs for the Acton 250 committee. There's a few odds and ends that need to be cleaned up this summer, and looks like we're on track to sunset in late September. Another issue that I wanted to raise, a couple of people have contacted me due to my background as an arborist with questions about the tree plantings at Kelly's Corner. And it doesn't take a certified arborist to tell you that that's not a good situation with the condition of the trees being there, being dropped off and left in a paved parking lot for prolonged periods of time under baking sun. Some of the trees that I've seen about to be planted probably did not have sufficient root ball size to begin with. And, I mean, we're in a drought. All of these trees will have drastically reduced root zone areas anyway. This time of year, you pretty much have to keep water on them constantly. It was really very late in the season to begin this kind of an active planting program. Would have been much better if they were planted during the dormant season. So there's lots of issues. The important thing for everybody to realize is that this is a state project. The town manager has been good with, as a liaison with Mass DOT, but neither the town manager nor any of us have much control of what's going on out there right now. But I just want to let everyone know that, yeah, we're aware of what's happening out there. My concern from a long-term point of view is a lot of these trees, they're supposed to be turned over to us at the end of the year, end of a year, in good condition. And depending on who's deciding what a tree is in good condition, I'd hate to see a situation where the town is going to inherit a large quantity of trees that are right at the edge of death. And then we ended up taking care of the long-term maintenance costs of that. The tree removal in the Kelly's Corner area was highly controversial. A lot of people got very emotional about it, and there's supposed to be a decent amount of tree cover that's been replaced, and if these things all either die or fail to thrive, it's not a good situation for anyone. So considering what I just said about how it's not the town manager's control, I'm looking at him because he is our liaison to Mass DOT, and if you haven't already, I'm sure if you let them know that this is something that's a concern to us, that we don't want to inherit a maintenance problem in the years to come. Thank you.
Any other member minutes? Fran?
I just wanted to announce the Economic Development Office is hosting a fun event, United by Soccer. Local businesses are invited to decorate their storefronts with World Cup themed displays celebrating the energy, colors, and global spirit of the tournament. So you can check out the town website for more info. Also, I'm the liaison to the Historical Commission, and there was a presentation by the Discovery Museum last week, and they're proposing an addition to the original building. You can go to the Historical Commission's DocuShare and access the plans. It really is lovely. And also, this is a friendly public service announcement. Now that the dog park is open, I wanted to remind folks to pick up your pooch's poop. There are poop bags provided at the park, and it could not be any easier. So let's try to do that.
Thank you. David?
I just want to let everyone know that last week, we had about 60 people here in this room for a heat pump pizza party where people came to eat pizza and learn about heat pumps. If anyone is interested in learning about heat pumps without any pizza, you can email sustainability@actonmad.gov, and they can send you the materials from the meeting last week.
Thank you. All right, our next agenda item is a very exciting one. We will be receiving from Acton Conservation Trust what I'm told is a huge check, not just a big check. So you want to come on up and tell us the good news?
Sorry, Hart, our treasurer of Acton Conservation Trust.
Good evening.
Here's our giant check right there, show it off. The Acton Conservation Trust want to tell you we are delighted to present this check of $113,620 to be used toward the purchase of 46 Taylor Road. 102 donors and ACT contributed to this total, which is the largest of the 7 campaigns ACT has run in the past 10 years. This is a clear reflection of how much the Arboretum means to everyone. Newsflash. Since we printed the check, one more donation came in, so the total will now be $116,620,000 from 103 donors. 2 checks in here. It's very touching to know how much the Acton Arboretum means to people. Very much thanks to all the volunteer work put in by the Friends of the Arboretum. They make it a joy and a destination in all seasons and a central park, as it has been called. It's a privilege for ACT to play a role along with our town team, the Open Space Committee, Community Preservation Committee, Select Board, and Town Manager. Let's do it again.
Thank you so much. I think that you're right, that this large amount is a testament to the popularity and the beloved nature of our Acton Arboretum. So I would invite anybody who's on the board, a member of ACT, a member of the Open Space Committee, Community Preservation Committee, anybody who wants to, we're gonna invite you all to join us back here behind the table, and we'll do a photo with our enormous check.
Right now.
And then I guess maybe as you get up and gather, maybe we should do a quick vote. I will accept a motion to accept this generous check.
Second.
Oh,
sorry.
David.
I move that the town accept the donation from Acton Conservation Trust of $116,620 to support the purchase of the property at 46 Taylor Road to be added to the Acton Arboretum.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We will happily accept this check. All right, and in related news, our item 4 is to accept the deed to 46 Taylor Road and authorize the town manager to sign.
Thank you. So the deed for this reflects the purchase price of $1.4 million, and the closing is scheduled for the first week of July. And so because we're not meeting until then, or until after then, I'd ask that you authorize me to sign this on behalf of the town.
David?
I think we have to read the exact words that are in the packet. Is that correct? I think it, and I'm happy to
Yes,
do that.
please.
It's long, it's 3 paragraphs long. I'm happy to do that, Madam Chair, if you want me to do that.
Yes, please.
At this duly called public meeting of the Acton Select Board, of the Select Board of the Town of Acton, the Select Board, on June 15th, 2026, the Select Board voted as follows with respect to the parcel of land in Acton, Massachusetts, known and numbered as 46 Taylor Road, Acton, Massachusetts, 01720, containing 5.8 acres of land, more or less, and shown as Lot B on that certain approval not required plan entitled Plan of Land in Acton, Ma, prepared by the Gilson Company, Inc., dated December 5th, 2001, and recorded with the Middlesex South Registry of Deeds as Plan 1283 of 2001, called the property. A, to approve and accept the deed to the property from Mary M. Donald to the town of Acton, acting by and through its select board substantially in the form presented to the select board at its June 15th, 2026 meeting, with final changes to be made by the town manager in his reasonable discretion in consultation with town council. And B, to authorize the town manager to take all actions on behalf of the select board that are reasonably necessary in the judgment of the town manager to complete the select board's acquisition of the property in accordance with that certain purchase and sale agreement between Mary M. Donald and the select board dated May 13th, 2026, including without limitation executing and delivering closing documents, affidavits, closing forms, deeds, acceptances, and settlement statements.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Okay, we're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Passes unanimously. And we will sign. And our next item is to approve our 2026 short and long-term goals. Last Monday, we had a 3-hour workshop in the library, and we have identified 5 short-term goals and 9 long-term goals, which are in the meeting packet and being displayed on the screen. I think that what I'd like to do is, first off, do a tiny bit of wordsmithing, if folks agree. The second short-term goal indicates that we will be implementing the deployment and staffing study, and I feel that even though there will continue to be study, after we implement whatever is recommended by staff, I think that it would be more accurate to say that we are going to be implementing next steps, because I think people view the Collins Center pilot program as the study. So that's my suggestion, and I'm wondering how the board feels about that, replacing study with next steps. No objections? Okay. And then another suggested edit. Oh, wait. Well, actually, I can go ahead and just see if there's any comment on it from board members. The third long-term goal, dealing with wastewater on Great Road, it says wastewater restrictions, and I'm suggesting that maybe we might want to change restrictions to limitations. And obviously, we're not going to change any regulations, the state or the town, but I'm just concerned that folks might read restrictions as having something to do with relaxing wastewater regulations. So my suggestion is to replace restrictions with limitations. Okay, all right. And then the last wordsmithing is to replace Concord Public Works on the 8th long-term goal with Town of Concord, because it seems a little presumptuous to suggest that we would decide who we would be working with in the Town of Concord. I think that should be left up to them. Sound good? Okay. Are there any other comments or suggested edits or retrospective thoughts on our process? David?
So not a real edit, but I would love to have these, when they're published on the town's website, numbered instead of bulleted. I find that through the year, people say, oh, long-term goal number 4, and it's nice that they're numbered, that's all. No content changes from me.
So I have a response to that. My response would be that that would indicate a priority, which I don't know that we want to do. I think that was a conscientious choice to bullet them. So I'm curious if anybody else has thoughts on that. David?
I still, I don't like the bullets. I think they're hard to reference. I mean, just in yours, just a minute ago, you said the 8th long-term goal. Okay, I had to count down the bullets. If we don't want to say that there's a number, then we could letter them. I'm happy to do that. And I think in the past, we've numbered them. And so I think that's, and also, there isn't we haven't specifically prioritized them, but the ones towards the top of the list did get more votes from us. So anyway, just my preference, we can all decide what we want to do, but is that they be individually identified.
That is a very good point, that the ones towards the top did get more votes. And maybe, I like lettering even less than numbering. I wonder if we can indicate that these goals, maybe just an introductory sentence, that these are the select board's goals, indicating that we are, all 5 of us, supporting them, and that they are equally important, or that there's no prioritization. I don't really care about, what?
We could put Roman numerals.
I don't really care about the exact wording on that, but it might be, what do you think about that, manager and deputy town manager?
Well, we were just figuring out how to annotate it, but they really did reflect priority. So to say that they didn't, I think would be inaccurate. So I think in the past 8 years, I think they've always been numbered. Last year was an outlier because of a reason I don't specifically remember, but I think it was because there was some disagreement about the priority at the retreat.
Okay, I mean, I know that several of the goals received the same number of votes, so the order of like the last 4 goals on the long term, if they all got 4 votes or 5 votes or whatever, but I'm okay with this numbering. Any other comments about the process? Fran?
I thought it went really well this year. The process was easy and fun, and I have no comment about numbers or bullets.
Pam?
I just want to comment that these goals were sort of chosen or ranked out of a total of 25 items that we looked at, and some of which we combined, but there's a lot of very, very worthy items on this list as well. But these were the ones that did rise to the top.
Thank you. I think the only thing that I would like to add on the process is every single year, so this is the 4th year that I've participated in the goal-setting workshop. When I go home, it feels to me like a little unstable. Like the process was a little rushed because we have that 1 3-hour workshop. But then the next day, when I read all of the goals in a draft, like David, you mentioned, when you go back and look at it later after, we're impressed by the goals that we all came up with. So I think maybe the only thing that might help that feeling for me of not taking enough time or being thoughtful is maybe to have them ahead of the 4 o'clock start time for our workshop. We turn them in and we can review them maybe during the day, and as long as they're published on the website. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that now, so hopefully when we're establishing the process next year, somebody will remember that. And if there are no, Fran?
I'll just add on to that in that I think some of the uneasiness about it is there are so many things to choose and we can't choose them all, you know? I think that's what's difficult for me.
Agreed. Dean?
Yeah, looking at the list of, especially short-term goals, I think there was some clear leaders there, especially at the top of that list, if I can use that term. And these reflect, a consistency on the part of the board over the years that we've recognized that these are important projects and we keep going ahead. If we had, through some process, brand new sets of goals every year, we would make no progress whatsoever. So I think, a clear prioritization of goals is good, and the fact that we're marching along in a very consistent, thoughtful process, which is reflected not only in our goals, but obviously with the town manager's capital improvement plan and everything else we've been dealing with. I think that's important. There's always other things that we could think about, but there's only so much money and there's only so much time. So I'm frankly quite pleased with both of these lists. I think they really reflect in a very tangible fashion the true needs of the town.
I agree wholeheartedly. And yes, Fran, there are a lot, and no matter how much time I consider that very long list, it still will feel difficult to choose because there are so many worthy suggested projects. It could just be that it would be better for my brain processing if I had the opportunity to read and think about them through the day, especially since there are sometimes 2 or 3 goals that are very similar that then we're combining or we're letting go and doing a little bit of editing on the spot. And that's always makes me uneasy. But I think it was definitely a good process because we came up with a really fantastic list of short-term and long-term goals. And I would love to have a motion to approve them. David?
I move that we approve the goals as listed in the packet with the edits from the chair and adding numbering to the goals.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, thank you. And our next item is a public hearing. The applicant has requested to continue this hearing, but I will read the notice. The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on June 15, 2026 at 6:30 p.m., continued from May 11, 2026, in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204 at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtually at actonma.gov/meeting/SB on a site plan special permit under zoning bylaw, section 10.4 at 13 School Street. The applicant, Alexander Moda, proposes to construct a mixed-use development consisting of ground floor commercial space with 7 residential units located on the upper levels. Application materials and how to participate remotely are available online and at Acton Town Hall, doc.actonma.gov/view/collection-20116. And the applicant has requested I will accept a motion to continue the hearing to July 6th, 2026 at 6:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and number 7 is to authorize an amendment to the purchase and sales agreement for 3 and 13 School Street.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, the town issued an RFP to sell those 2 properties, and the sale is contingent on the buyer having an approved site plan. And so in the previous agenda item, the board just continued its hearing to decide whether to approve it or not. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for us to extend the time period we could give the buyer to complete their permitting process. I think the buyer requested to extend it to the first week of August. So I'd ask authorization to enter into an amendment to our purchase and sales agreement to that effect, somewhere in the early part of August. And I can go into more detail if that's helpful. Otherwise, I can keep it right there.
Okay, any questions or comments from board members? Do you have a specific motion?
Move that the board authorize the town manager to sign an amended purchase and sale agreement for 3 and 13 School Street, reflecting an extension on the closing date.
David?
So moved, as the town manager said.
Do you want us to repeat that, Lisa? Okay. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Dean. All right. Any further discussion? Okay, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes, and we are on to our next item, which is to approve the FY 2027 sewer rates.
Thank you. This is an annual practice that the board takes a moment and acts as sewer commissioners, or even doing it in your capacity as select board members. I think one of your long-term goals will help clear that up in the future. But we have a presentation from our budget director, Ellie Anderson. We also have our assistant DPW director, town engineer, Evan White, in this virtual room. And we're going to go over what we're proposing to do for sewer rates for FY '27. Ellie, take it away.
Good evening. Tom is passing around hard copies of both the sewer rate recommendation presentation and then the ambulance rate recommendation presentation, which will follow. So we wanted to take this opportunity to provide a bit of a refresher or an overview on Acton sewers before we dive into this year's recommendation. So essentially, to sum it all up, after decades of discussion and town meeting votes regarding construction of the sewers in Acton, town meeting over the course of 1997 to 1999 approved the creation of the Middle Fort Pond Sewer District. Construction of the sewer system then began in 2000, was completed in 2002. The sewer system received a really large upgrade, which was completed in 2025 through the wastewater treatment facility rehabilitation project. So the initial construction of the sewer system was financed through betterments, and betterments were assessed to property owners within the Middle Fort Pond Sewer District. There were also capital assessments to the town of Acton, the Acton Housing Authority, and ADRSD. All of this money was used to finance the construction of the sewer system. The betterments were assessed to properties, and that calculation was based on the total number of sewer betterment units, or SBUs, that each property possessed. The cost per SBU at the time was $12,311.52. And at that time, property owners could either pay that betterment upfront, or they could finance it and pay as part of their quarterly tax bill over a period of 30 years. There are 4 main types of revenue that go into the Sewer Enterprise Fund. The first are those betterments. The betterments will cease when the debt service to construct the sewer system is paid off in fiscal year 2031. The next type are those capital assessments, which are charged to those 3 entities, as I mentioned. These will also expire after FY 2031 when that debt service is paid off. The privilege fees are assessed to any land which was not previously part of the sewer district, or anyone who is in the sewer district who wants a more intensified use of their property than what they were originally allocated. These fees were most recently adjusted by the sewer commissioners in 2022, and they're currently $14,000 for the first bedroom for residential properties, and then $8,000 for every additional bedroom after that. And then finally, we have operations and maintenance. These are billed monthly to sewer customers, so everyone who's currently connected to the sewer system. And these bills are meant to cover the operating cost of the sewer system as well as maintenance and capital upgrades. To take a little bit of a detour to go back into privilege fees, this is just a little bit more background information on what the fees are currently. In addition to the residential fees that I mentioned, commercial fees are calculated for each property on a square footage basis, and they're charged to anyone who wants to expand their sewer usage or join the sewer district. We're not recommending any changes to the current privilege fees at this time. So next for costs, we have 3 main categories. Operations and maintenance include salaries, which are allocated to the sewer enterprise fund, electricity to run the sewer system, billing, contractual services, and pass-through. Capital includes capital outlay and machinery and equipment, which could include repairs or replacement of equipment. Finally, we have debt service. The debt that we have on the books right now includes the debt service to construct the original sewer system. As we said, this will expire after fiscal year 2031. We have the debt service for the rehabilitation project at the sewer plant. That debt service came online in fiscal 2026, so this year. And then upcoming, we're expecting debt service for the equalization tank. This borrowing authorization was approved at town meeting, the 2025 town meeting. And for forecasting purposes, we're currently estimating that the first debt service payment would come due in fiscal 2029. So rate setting, the reason why we're here, the rates are prepared annually by finance staff and then presented to the sewer commissioners for a vote after town meeting and then prior to the start of the next fiscal year. In 2024, we developed a financial model to predict future rate increases, ensure fiscal sustainability for the sewer enterprise fund, and also to build up our retained earnings to support the future needs of the sewer system. In January of 2024, the sewer commissioners approved the use of privilege fee money to pay for the sewer rehab debt service through fiscal year 2031. So for fiscal year 2027, we are recommending a 4.5% rate increase. If approved, the residential rate would be $0.1798 per cubic foot. The commercial and school rates would be $0.2538 per cubic foot. On a billing increase basis, this would amount to $3.89 more per month for the average single-family residential customer, $14.09 more for the average commercial customer, and $90.73 for the average school account. The amount of operating costs that we use when working on this rate recommendation is less than what was approved at town meeting. We've been planning on a significant increase in operating costs, which would be caused by the increase in wastewater flow into the sewer plant due to the new housing connections at Powder Mill and McManus Manor. Historically, these contractual adjustments for the plant operators are finalized at this time of year, and they go into effect right before the start of the fiscal year that they're for. So we just received our fee adjustment, our costs for fiscal year 2027. So we needed to add additional contingency to the 2027 budget so that there would be adequate budget capacity if that increase hit in FY 2027. But we found that the actual fee adjustment that we received was well below what we had budgeted. The middle column, marked town meeting, reflects what was approved by town meeting, but the updated expected column reflects the actual cost per the fee adjustment recently received from our plant operator. The fee adjustment timeline will be resolved with the FY 2028 budget cycle. So what will happen is our contractor will calculate the fee adjustment in September or October so that we know what our costs for the upcoming fiscal year will be while we're working on the budget, so that we can actually budget for what we need instead of having to estimate like we had to do this year. So how are these rates calculated? As shown, there were a few variables that we were working through in calculating this rate recommendation. The first is when we can expect full occupancy and therefore realize the added flow and revenue coming from the two housing projects, one at Powder Mill Place and then the other one at McManus Manor. So Rivage at Powder Mill Place began filling units in January of 2026. So we started billing them. But as of today, they're 16% occupied and 25% leased. So for forecasting purposes, we're planning on full occupancy in January of 2026. So we had originally assumed full occupancy for July 1st, so we're having to adjust our forecast. For the McManus property, we're expecting that construction will be complete and people will begin moving in this summer. So we're forecasting full occupancy for October. The second is the significant increase in contractual costs, excuse me, which will come in line with increased flow volume. We're currently estimating a 20% increase in our contractual costs, and we're placing that increase in FY 2028. Finally, we have the equalization tank project. As I said earlier, $2.1 million in borrowing authorization was approved at the 2025 town meeting. For forecasting purposes, we're assuming that repayment will begin in FY 2029 and that the estimated debt service is beginning around $160,000 a year. So why 4.5% in FY 2027? We found that the revenue from this increase would cover operating costs in the next fiscal year. It considers the variables that we discussed, and it keeps us on track with maintaining a fund balance of at least 50% of the annual budget. So I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Board members, questions? David?
Yes, more. I have I have one possible correction. On slide 10, did you mean full occupancy in January 2027?
I sure did.
Okay.
Thank you.
So as you can see from Ellie's slides, apartments or non-single family homes like this, that they come online much faster than single family homes, right? We're ramping up hundreds of units in the course of a year, which is a big deal, and requires more work on Ellie's part to figure out when they're going to happen. And in addition, one thing Ellie didn't mention, there's 13 apartments probably going to happen in South Acton, which, while not as big as either of the two things mentioned here, is something, right? So, so that's important. The final thing actually doesn't affect these numbers, but something to consider in future years. My understanding is that the state is going to have new restrictions on sludge disposal in future years, which will cause our sludge disposal costs to go up. So I don't think those will hit this year, but anyway, thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Pam?
I just want to ask about the timing for this vote. I know it's being presented tonight. This was a lot of information, and, I'm still trying to absorb it all. Is there a time factor in needing the vote to be tonight? like before the start of the fiscal year?
So we run the first bills for the new fiscal year. Those will be run at the end of July. So in order to get a full year's worth of revenue, we would need an approved rate before probably July 23rd, if I were to throw a date out.
Do you have a follow-up? Yeah. Not yet, okay. Dean? All right, I have a couple of questions. I was writing them down, but then the next slide answered most of the ones that I wrote down. I'm a little surprised by the way we calculate privilege fees for commercial as a square footage. I would think that it would be based on expected volume, because you might have, a warehouse that might have just a couple of bathrooms for employees versus some other kind of more water-intensive use, whether that's a childcare center or restaurant. Is there anything else that goes into the commercial privilege fee calculation?
Yeah, I think Evan can help answer that as well, but it's also based on Title V, what Title V thinks the property would be.
Yeah, John,
Go ahead.
It's based off of Title V expected flows. I haven't had to calculate one of these yet, but from my understanding is that the expected use of the facility comes into play as well as the square footage. It's not just a simple square footage calculation.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. The other question I had, maybe it's more of a comment. Last year, I recall that we were calculating live in our sewer rate meeting the total increase until FY '31. I think Jim came up with like 46% if we anticipated having it go up annually by 6.5%. So it looks like it might not get that high, but it was just, worth noting that that's a significant increase. So maybe it'll be a little bit less because we're able to do 4.5% this year. So that's always good news. I'm wondering, I know that the new model is so that we can have the enterprise fund take over the debt service. Does that include the debt service that we're going to be taking on starting in FY '29 for the EQ tank? Yes, okay.
It does. I will say that when we did that initial presentation with, we did the Sewer Finance 101 and the Commissioners Workshop, and then we came back later and did the vote for the privilege fees. That was pre-EQ tank. So the addition of the EQ tank and the debt service that's associated with it is a new variable. So the model has had to adjust from what was originally presented.
So are we still good for each fiscal year after this one, or is it going to be even higher than, because I think last year you had every single fiscal year an expected 6.5% increase. Is that going to go up even higher because of the EQ tank?
I think the other thing that's really changed since we did that initial presentation is that the fund balance position for the enterprise fund has improved drastically from where it was. So I think that was one of the things that really prompted the creation of the financial model and the rate setting plan, is because we had significantly less retained earnings and less cash on hand to deal with anything that came up than we do right now. So I think that's one of the factors, that's allowed us to adjust the rate increases that we might see. So will it be 4.5% every year between now and fiscal '32? I can't say for certain, but I think there's a little bit more room for flexibility because of that.
Okay, thank you, that's good to know. Speaking of unexpected things, I was happy to hear you say that we're going to get the updated rates in the fall instead of waiting, because I think that'll help us be more accurate with the budgeting. what happens if something unexpected comes about? Do they have, the operator of the plant, do they have the ability to change that on us, like mid-budgeting process? And would that be an issue for us, or would we just adjust like we always do?
I unfortunately don't know the ins and outs of the contract offhand, but I will say that baked into the budget is a fair amount of contingency funding. So we budget for machinery and equipment, we budget for capital outlay. Those two things together are typically $220,000. Also built into the contract is a pass-through line, which has an additional $285,000, and that's also to deal with things that might come up. So we do have a bit of flexibility, like within the scope of the budget that we're approving annually to deal with if a pump station breaks or something else goes down. We do have funding available to deal with it.
Thank you, good news. Any other comments or questions from the board? David?
Just one comment on privilege fees. Privilege fees are set up more for the potential of the property than what business is there first. Privilege fees are only paid once. So for example, any store in Kelly's Corner, because they're all sewered, could change to a restaurant, right? And they go from having, one bathroom for employees to washing dishes and having, 75 seats for customers or something. So they're not set by the first business that goes in there. Second is, it's kind of, when we set them even for houses, it's set by bedrooms, even though one person is living in the house or whatever, it's still set that way. I mean, it's an approximation no matter how you do it. I just also want to comment, that's why Ellie alluded to this, and the situation is similar to the water district, actually, that the retained earnings for a utility like this are quite important to deal with unexpected things. In an absolute worst case, right, if we had a really drastic failure, we might need a special town meeting to authorize borrowing, which would then be paid off out of the enterprise fund. But normal catastrophes are handled with retained earnings.
We don't want any catastrophes. Are there any public comments? Either in the room or online? All right. You had a motion for us, right? David?
I move to approve the FY 2027 sewer rates as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, that's unanimous. Thanks, Evan, for your help. And our next item of business is to approve the FY 2027 ambulance rates.
So we have the chief of the fire department here, as well as the deputy chief. But I think we're going to have our budget director kick this presentation off.
So the select board we were last here discussing ambulance rates in April of 2025. And those rates were in effect for the remainder of fiscal '25, and then they've been in effect for all of 2026. At that time, similar to with sewer, we developed a financial model and a rate-setting plan for the ambulance enterprise fund, which prioritizes standardized rate setting, reasonable assumptions and forecasts for revenue and expenses, and then also focuses on the fiscal sustainability of the fund, and then seeing if we can reduce the reliance of the fund on the general fund subsidy. If approved, these rates would go into effect for fiscal 2027. So on this slide, we have our operating budget. So the budget approved by town meeting is just over $2.1 million. That's an increase of almost $160,000 or 7.9%. The most significant assumptions that we made in the financial forecast is an increase to the overtime budget in fiscal year 2028 to better align it with actual spending. This would result in a budgeted increase of $125,000. Also a reduction to the general fund subsidy in FY28 from what was approved in FY27. So hypothetically, we reduced it by $154,000. In FY29, we're also forecasting an increase in ambulance leasing costs due to the need to replace ambulances. And this is an increase of $150,000 a year, starting in fiscal '29 and then going out. So the rates that we're recommending for fiscal year 2027 is a 10% increase across all run types. So if approved, these newer rates would be $2,909 for ALS 1 runs, $4,211 for ALS 2 runs, $2,449 for BLS runs, and then $43 as the mileage rate. So why these rates? As we discussed the last time we were here, talking about the Ambulance Enterprise Fund, revenues for the ambulance service are challenging to calculate and to forecast. And the reason for this is that rides are billed to Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, or to the patient directly. And then the amount of money that the town's going to collect over an annualized basis depends on who that invoice is sent to. And then the revenues are further impacted by the proportion, the breakdown of how many bills are sent to each entity. So though someone might call for an ambulance ride on July 1st, the Ambulance Enterprise Fund might not receive full payment for that ride within that fiscal year or at all. So ultimately, we found that a 10% rate increase is necessary to ensure the sustainability of the fund as well as to prepare it for upcoming capital needs. So on this slide, I just have a bit of an update on some of our data. So on the left-hand side, we have the share of rides by billing type. So 43% of the rides that the ambulances did in fiscal year 2025 were for Medicare. And then we have Medicaid at 13%, private insurance at 41%, and then a little tiny percentages for facility contracts, bill patient, and private pay. And then for Medicare, the collection rate over that 1 year period is 23% of what was fully billed, 16% for Medicaid, 54% for private insurance, and then 7% each for facility contract and bill patient. So these significantly impact the relationship between what we're billing for runs and then what we actually collect on a yearly basis. So then on the right-hand side, we just have an update of runs in general. So the blue are our total ALS runs, and then the red are our BLS runs. So we can see that runs are consistently increasing year over year, but the split between ALS runs and BLS runs is kind of shifting. We're doing less ALS, more BLS. So then finally, especially because we're requesting a 10% increase, we wanted to see how the fees for our ambulance service at these rates compare to what our neighboring communities are charging. So Chief Arnhem did some outreach to her fellow fire chiefs. And what we found is that the proposed FY 2027 ambulance rates are comparable with our neighboring communities, if not a little bit lower. So that's us in the yellow. And then I have it sorted in the ALS 1 column from lowest rate to highest rate. So we're consistent with what other people are charging. So I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Any questions, comments from the board? David.
I have two questions. Maybe these are for the chief or deputy chief. The difference between ALS 1, ALS 2, and BLS are the certifications of the EMS staff that are responding to the call?
No, it has to do with the services provided. BLS call means just basic life support services are provided. ALS 1 means fewer than 3 ALS interventions are done. Might be an IV, a monitor, and a drug. If there's more than 3 interventions done, then it's an ALS 2 call. So it has to do with the acuity of the call and the services provided. We provide the same staff on all of those calls for the majority of the time.
Thank you, and I have a second question, which is maybe for Ellie or the chief, I don't know who. If there's a call for EMS and our paramedics respond on scene, but the person is not transported, is there any insurance billing?
There's no billing unless there's a transport.
Right.
And I believe that has to do with legal requirements.
Yes. So I just want to also this is just a comment because someone on email, a resident in email asked a question because she thought that our fire department ambulances were covered by taxes. That's really not the case. They're covered by the enterprise fund, which is reimbursed, as Ellie's described, from the billing we make to the billing we make against Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance companies, which is variable and intermittent depending on who's being billed. Sometimes we supplement that enterprise fund with general revenue taxes, and that one of the reasons for that is, and that's my question just a moment ago, some calls are not covered by insurance, and so our taxes do provide the money for that. But if you have a loved one who's transported to the hospital, that's not covered by your taxes.
Any other questions? Pam?
So those collection rates seem to be staggeringly low. Are they typical?
I think that is fairly typical. I think what we're seeing more now is, I think what I described earlier this year is that we're in a ambulance desert somewhat, where the private facilities such as Life Care and Devon Drive, they cannot get private ambulances anymore for some of their BLS transports. And a majority of those patients are Medicaid patients or Medicare patients. So I think that probably accounts for a large portion of that. In the past, they would call a private service to transport somebody to get blood work done. If they call 911, we're obligated to transport them to an emergency department. So it's not even really where they need to go, but they have no other resource currently, so they call us. And I believe that's probably leading to some of those lower rates.
Any other questions or comments? Pam, I appreciate that observation that you made. I just have a follow-up question on that. I know that we might get a bill from our health insurance provider that is, or our doctor rather, that is very, very high relative to what the insurance provider will reimburse. And I don't know if that is the case, like, you know, this procedure is only $4,000, we're gonna charge the insurance company $10,000 because we're only gonna get about $4,000. Is that something that we have to engage in with ambulance charges, or are we setting our rates, because they're comparable with the other communities, where even maybe a little bit low? Is that the cost that the rate is based on, or is it the anticipation of the very, very low percentage of what we're gonna get reimbursed for?
I think it's probably a combination of both, because if you calculated everything that we bill on an annual basis, we're only collecting about, I think last I checked, 37% of that. So we do have to set rates in a manner that what we're ultimately collecting is going to sustain the fund and the budget that's approved. So I think it's kind of a combination of both. I can't speak like for other communities and how they're setting rates, but the rate calculation is so that the rates that are charged, what we're actually collecting is going to sustain the budget.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that we are trying to reduce the reliance on the general fund subsidy, and it's probably in the budget binder, which I don't have in front of me. So I'm just wondering if you can remind us about what percentage of the cost of the ambulance service needs to be subsidized by the general fund and not covered by the enterprise fund, just roughly.
So I can tell you that the subsidy in FY '27 was $454,000, and then the budget that was approved was $2.1 million.
All right, thank you. Are there any comments from members of the public, either in the room or online? Okay, then I will accept a motion. David?
I move to approve the FY 2027 ambulance rates as presented.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And any abstentions? All right. Next on our agenda, thank you, Ellie, is a presentation of the Fire Department Operational Deployment Pilot Study.
Thank you. Chief Arnhem will join us up here to help with this discussion. About a year ago, actually it was more than a year ago, but last year we received a grant from the state to help us look at a study with our fire and EMS services, and we were able to use that funding to hire a consultant, and they worked with us to try to document a pilot program. And we have the near final draft. The grant requires us to finish this by June 30th, and there was a little bit of a delay because there was a transition in the project team. But we have the near final draft, and I think we're ready to share some of this information now. And I think overall, we have a report that provides us a little bit of data about call responses. So let me set up the pilot first. So back in 2022, when we put the new North Acton Fire Station into service, we didn't add any staffing to the fire department. It was a decision made at the time. I think it was in the best interest of trying to do what we could with what was available. And but what we found was that it led to some issues with morale, with supervision, with training, and other various items. And we started to see some significant turnover in the department. And so we began a pilot study last year to say, okay, what if we put all the firefighters and the apparatus into 2 stations? And we tried that for 3 months. And then we said, oh, okay, there was things about that didn't work. So then let's put them into 3 stations. And at that point, we put them in the North Station, the South Station, and the West Acton Station, and we left the center open. And we tried that for a few months. And during both of those periods, the Collins Center helped us by doing a survey of the staff, of the department members, to see what they thought of each of those phases. And it also conducted a survey of the public to see if anyone noticed or any other observation that they wanted to share. And then that was sort of the end of the pilot period. And since that time, though, we stayed in a 3-station alignment, but we restaffed the center station, and the West Station is the one is not being staffed right now. It's actually under repair. So what we have in this report is pretty good data about the response times from those 2 different scenarios and how they compare to previous response times. We have really valuable input from the members of the department about things that they didn't like and things that they liked about both before the pilot and during the pilot. And we had some recommendations for how to improve some of the things that made the study difficult. One of the things that they recommended is that we take more time to lay out exactly what we want dispatch to record when there's a call. Because they're doing a lot in that dispatch center, and there's several things that they could do, but I think what they observed is that there's a few more things that if they did it for the fire department, it would help us track calls in a more consistent fashion. So I think I'll leave it at that, and I'd like to hand it over to the chief to give her input and kind of overview of the study. But I think it was a very valuable process. The union membership was engaged, the community was engaged, and it's a good source for us to use as we continue to move forward and work on the department.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, Madam Chair, Select Board, Deputy Town Manager and Town Manager, members of the public. Thank you for the opportunity to present the results of the Fire Department pilot program and the subsequent evaluation conducted by the Collins Center for Public Management. But before discussing the results, I would like to recognize and thank the members of Professional Firefighters Massachusetts 1904 and the Teamsters Local 25, which is dispatched, for their cooperation and professionalism throughout the pilot program. It was a very challenging endeavor. We had a lot of changes. The direction changed from time to time, so it was a little period of unrest. It was a significant operational undertaking, and their willingness to adapt and provide feedback was essential to the process. If you want to throw up, you got the first slide up, okay. The pilot program was undertaken in response to operational challenges that emerged following the opening of Station 4 in February of '22 without the addition of personnel. While the fourth station improved geographic coverage, it also spread existing staffing across 4 locations, resulting in only 2 members assigned to each station. This staffing model created several concerns, including firefighter safety, supervisory oversight, training opportunities, personal morale, and operational efficiency. It also increased our reliance on cross-staffing apparatus and personnel. So not so much the reliance on cross-staffing, but some challenges when we had to do cross-staffing. For example, mutual aid responses often require a minimum of 3 personnel, frequently resulting in 2 stations being brought offline when we had to respond mutual aid. And then we'd have to rely on mutual aid coming into our town to help cover our town. The ambulance and the engines cross-staffing can sometimes leave primary firefighting apparatus or a second ambulance unavailable when needed. Ladder truck, brush truck units, and engines also run into this cross-staffing because down south they cross-staff 3 pieces of apparatus, and while they're in one apparatus, the other 2 are not available. Extended ambulance transport times can further reduce the availability of emergency resources in the community. If we have to transport someone into Boston or to Worcester, it's often a very long turnaround time when that piece of apparatus may be unstaffed. So prior to the pilot program, the town commissioned the criterion study, which evaluated station locations, response times, and community coverage just based on the data that was already available. And that's what you see up here is what their recommended response was. They analyzed response performance through travel time modeling and heat mapping and concluded that a 2-station model consisting of a station located at Station 4 and a new facility in the Kelly's Corner area could potentially maintain service levels while allowing for safer and more efficient staffing. We obviously don't have something in Kelly's Corner, so we tried using North Station and the South Station. The study also highlighted the importance of staffing levels in relation to industry standards, including NFPA 1710 and Insurance Services Office's benchmarks. So they look at some standard, what's known as consensus standards that we try to strive for. You can go to the next one. So in the pilot program, so the Collins Center grant provided the town with the opportunity to evaluate some of these alternative deployment models and assess operational effectiveness through a structured pilot program. And like any real-world evaluation, the study faced challenges during the pilot period. The South Acton Station cannot comfortably accommodate 5 personnel, and that's what required some of the adjustment to go to a 3-station model. Main Street and Kelly's Corner were undergoing significant construction, affecting travel times throughout much of the study period. The center station, as the town manager mentioned, remained unstaffed during the evaluation, and that most likely led to some increased response times. So response time data collection was not always consistent across all apparatus, limiting some portions of the analysis, and improvements to the data collection are already underway. Despite these challenges, the evaluation period provided valuable information regarding response performance, staffing configurations, department operations, and employee feedback. So we received some key recommendations or findings from the Collins Center, but I do want to highlight what they said. They said significant data limitations constrain causal conclusions based on the response time analysis. These include missing data, unequal study periods, and structural limitations in dispatch records. Consequently, the report emphasizes cautious interpretation of response time findings. So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Some of the areas for improvement include enhanced response time data collection and performance measurements, improved crew assignments and personnel rotation practices. One of the things that we hear often from some of our crew is they don't get an opportunity to work on some different apparatus, and we're trying to address some of that as well. We are constrained somewhat by what credentials different people have. So if we need an ALS ambulance, we need a paramedic on there. So we looked at that. Increased attention to apparatus and equipment reliability was brought forth from the members. Strengthened communication between administration and personnel. As I said, it was a very fluid time, and there was a lot of information going back and forth, and it was a stressful period. Expansion of training opportunities and professional development programs is something that they were looking for, as well as recognition that increased staffing on apparatus generally improves safety, morale, operational efficiency, and service delivery. So improvements already implemented. A lot of these things have been addressed. As you heard from the town manager, we reopened the center fire station to improve resource distribution and community coverage. If you look, all the stations are along Main Street. I don't have the graphic here, but North Station, the Center Station, and the South Station are essentially equally divided in town, providing equal coverage. Comprehensive review and updating of departmental standard operating procedures has been ongoing and continues, and we're receiving positive feedback from that. Development of improved dispatch protocols and more accurate apparatus time tracking. We're working with the dispatch supervisor and dispatchers to develop more standard SOPs. We're also looking at some additional software that may help. Expansion of training opportunities, including leadership development and specialized instruction. The Fire Academy does offer free programs, but we do have to pay overtime for people to attend or to cover. Acquisition of replacement apparatus, as I'm sure you're well aware, we have a ladder truck, an engine, a car, and an ambulance all on order. We're constrained by some of the long acquisition times. One of the things we did is we established an ALS engine position after trying an ALS fly car in North Acton, which is our busiest district. So while the fly car model was not widely embraced by the staff, the ALS engine position has proven beneficial, and we're going to try and keep that in place. That gives our paramedics the opportunity to work on an engine and provide ALS care at the same time. So looking forward, the evaluation reaffirmed what national research and industry standards have consistently demonstrated, that increased staffing improves firefighter safety, operational effectiveness, and service delivery. Studies conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, commonly known as NIST, have shown that 3-person engine companies perform significantly more efficiently than 2-person engine companies, while NFPA 1710 actually recommends 4-person engine companies for career fire departments. The report also highlighted the need for additional supervisory capacity. The addition of a second lieutenant position would improve operational oversight, create promotional opportunities, and strengthen succession planning and enhance mutual aid deployment capabilities if we ever get to that point. And then we would have supervision in all 3 stations. So the pilot program provided valuable insight to our operations and helped identify opportunities to improve service delivery, firefighter safety, and organizational effectiveness. Again, I would like to thank all members who participated in the evaluation process and provided feedback. We remain committed to working collaboratively with Local 1904 and Local 25 to build upon the lessons learned, continue improving our operations, and provide the highest level of service to the residents of Acton. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Chief. I appreciate all that information. I really appreciate all of your leadership, but also all of the staff for their professionalism and patience through this really challenging process. I especially appreciate learning about all of the things that we've already implemented that the Collins Center identified as areas of improvement. I've definitely seen the crews out training more frequently this winter. I saw them doing some ice rescue training on Ice House Pond, and I follow the union's Facebook page, and they're always putting up pictures of different trainings that they're doing with new staff. I do have one question before I open it up to the board for questions and comments. I was confused by the response time that the Collins Center is listing in the report. Wasn't sure whether that was measured from the time that a call is picked up by dispatch when somebody calls 911, or if it is when the crew is leaving the station, or it's travel time. What is response time?
So technically, response time should be from time of dispatch until time of arrival. I believe the Collins Center actually put data in for both. In one of the first charts, it was like from the time that the call came in, and then a little later in some of the charts, they looked at actual response time of the apparatus from the time it was dispatched. The firefighters knew about it and responded to the scene. One of the key components, too, that we were looking at was response of second due apparatus. Because if we're responding with only 2 people to a structure fire, there's a rule out there that's 2 in, 2 out, where you're essentially not supposed to, unless there's an imminent life danger, to put 2 people into a structure fire unless we have 2 people available to help them as well, and to provide services to get them out if we have to. So I think the Collins Center report reported both, and that's why you'll see some response times at the 10, 12-minute range, and then you'll see some in the 4 to 5-minute range.
Thank you. I'm not sure it was like clear enough to me to distinguish which figure that they were listing, and there was a lot of data in that report.
I can assure you, we do not take 10 minutes to respond to a call.
I'm sure. Any questions or comments from board members? Okay, David?
Thank you for, Chief, for your comments. Actually, I thought the comments that you've made have kind of pulled together a lot of things from the report, and so I really appreciate that. From me, I'm concerned about staffing in the department. I would like to deal with that. I have to say, though, that it's very difficult for me to do that without a plan for the stations, right? We're dealing with 3 of our 4 buildings being old, and some of them needing similar improvements, some of them have their own things. All of those improvements are going to be expensive when they hit. And I think it's not possible, really, for us in a financial sense to deal with both the staffing and improving all the stations we have. The second point is, I don't think we need 4 stations, right? Similar communities don't have 4 stations. The response times, I mean, there was a caveat by the Collins Center team saying, you know, there was missing data and other things that the data may not be exact. But to me, what that report said was that the response times from 2 or 3 stations are not going to be a disaster for the town, right? If we went to either a 2 or 3 station model, and some of these numbers had shown that, you know, the response time doubled, that would be a clear issue, or someplace we don't want to go. But it didn't show that, right? And whether they're off by 15 seconds or something, you know, I don't know. But to me, that's not going to be a disaster. And so, for me, you know, I'm not speaking for any other members of the board. I would like to see us decide where we want to go long-term, and I would advocate for a two-station model, and until we can accommodate a two-station crew in South Acton, then we would stay at a three-station model, right? And at the time we needed to improve, the buildings get to the point where we need to, make capital improvements to the buildings. We should strongly consider expanding the South Acton Station, Station 2, to be able to accommodate a crew in its two-station model with, the space that's, may not be exactly the same as the North Acton Station, but something like that. And during that transition, that we, are in a three-station model and may use all of our stations until we're done with this process, right? We know construction projects take a long time, right? If the town did decide to expand the South Acton Station, that's likely to take years from beginning to end. I mean, it's not necessarily years that the station couldn't be occupied, but it's going to be years between the, conception and when the firefighters can move into that station. And so, and during that interval, we would need all of our existing stations. But it's, so this was my interpretation of our goal for this year is to come up with that station plan, what the end goal is, and then maybe what the intermediate steps are, right? We move out of this station and then take that time to, and I know some of the stations need window upgrades, for example, that we would do window upgrades or whatever other upgrades or an expansion or whatever other things that are necessary to make it a livable, workable, efficient station. And then as we move through that, we get to the end goal, right? So that's where I'm coming from.
I appreciate that, and I think it probably warrants some further discussion. As indicated by the first study, they do recommend a two-station model, but moving that south station further north. And I know that's a big undertaking if we were to do something like that. The other things we need to consider, I think, is when we had the two-station model, it was a long response for what we call the second due piece to get north or to come south. And that's our water supply piece. And right now, we have that piece in the center. It's being cross-staffed so that they can equally go to either side of town. So there is some benefit to having, at least right now, the three-station model, in my opinion, but I do believe it warrants a little further discussion and getting some people together, working with the union. They do have a lot of good ideas. And as Madam Chair, you mentioned, they do a terrific job. They make me proud every day with what they do. So I would I'm not a huge advocate of study after study after study, because I think that's delays getting things done. But I think it needs to be a little more maybe discussion with a work group or something like that.
So I want to say when we were talking about moving the, in some ideal world, moving the South Acton Station further north, since that time, we now have 230 units at the far, far, far corner of town. And that Powder Mill area, most of it's in Maynard, but some of it's in Acton, is likely to be up and coming. And so it seems to me that the center of responses may move a little bit south there. I do want to ask you, when you talked about the water supply in the center station, can you explain what that is?
So typically, the first responding apparatus during a fire is going to arrive. It's going to, deploy their first hose line using the water from the tank, which is limited. The second due piece of apparatus, one of their primary responsibilities is to supplement with their water, but also hook into a more permanent water supply, whether it be a hydrant or some areas of town that don't have hydrant, we have to do drafting. In that case, we usually call in Carlisle or Boxborough for a tanker truck, which brings about 3,000 gallons of water to work off of. So we do have different standard response models in place to get water established, but that's a critical piece. With a 1,500 gallon per minute pump and 1,250 gallons of water on a truck, you only have less than a minute of water potentially, depending upon how much water you're flowing. So it's really important to get that water supply established. Even if the first new truck shows up and can what we call hook a hydrant, typically all they're gonna be able to do is wrap the hydrant with the hose and drive into the scene, and they're relying on the second truck or second piece of apparatus, it could be the ambulance, because they're firefighter paramedics, then they will hook up to the hydrant and get the water flowing. But if you look at the NFPA 1710, there's 22 tasks that have to be accomplished at the scene of a fire in the first couple of minutes. 22 tasks split with, right now, 10 people on duty. If they're all available and not on another call, because we've been pretty busy, that's a big haul. So we do try and call mutual aid early, but then there's time delays. Fires will double in size every minute, and it's logarithmic. So you really have to get in and do an initial knockdown to get some water on the red stuff, so we say.
Dean?
Thank you. I certainly respect David's comments on this, but looking at it and my understanding from past history is that perhaps long-term, we should be looking more at a 3-station model along that Route 27 spine of the town. The issue I have with saying, well, we can't do anything until we get decent facilities is that my experience with major capital projects here in town is it takes about 10 years, cradle to grave, on these projects. Fire departments, even worse, almost 50 years for the North Acton Fire Station. So I'm a little skeptical that I'm personally convinced that we're probably going to need to expand our workforce in the department. I don't think that we can go with the present situation for the next 10 years. And I think 10 years is probably an optimistic time frame for looking at a new fire station. South Acton fires, all 3 existing older fire stations all have unique constraints because of their age. And also, they're in village settings. There's not a lot of room to expand. All of them are in historic districts, those 3 the traditional ones, which create their own challenges when it comes to design of a new building. Thinking of the existing site for the South Acton Fire Station, I'm not convinced that there's enough territory there to actually expand that station to the degree that it needs to be expanded. You've got residences on both sides of it. You've got Chapter 97 land directly behind it, which I think includes the parking lot. So that creates some real issues as far as just having enough footprint for expanding that station significantly. So, and you look at the center station, we have the same sorts of challenges there. Plus, it's an incredibly high visibility site. West Acton is probably the station that I would think, when we eventually go to a 3-station model, would be the one that would probably get put into reserve service. I think the West Acton station, and the town manager and I discussed this about a year ago when we were looking at, do we move ahead with the tight tank and the other upgrades for the West Acton station, considering that we might not need all 4 stations long-term. What I pushed for, and the town manager agreed to, was that, maybe we won't need West Acton forever, but I could see a need to keeping the West Acton station available as swing space for as we either create new facilities or do major renovations. There are no simple solutions. When we look at all this, I don't know what the per employee cost of hiring new firefighters, paramedics is, but just if you throw a number at it, say $100,000 a year per person, and previous chiefs have told me that they needed as many as 16 more firefighters. So you could be looking at an increase to satisfy the concept that, for instance, Chief Futterer came up with. You could be looking at an extra $2 million worth of payroll for the fire and EMS. All of this at the same time that our colleagues in the Finance Committee are telling us that we have to look at ways that we can cut our workforce down. I think the bottom line is that there are no cheap solutions to this, and I think folks are going to have to pay for it. And I think we have to realize that this is a very, very long-term situation. And I don't think that we can wait 5 years before we get started on it. I think we need to, and this is one of the goals that we voted on, we need to start moving ahead with some sort of a plan that we all can get behind within this, hopefully calendar year, if not fiscal year. A long-range plan of what we can agree to and start implementing it, and realizing that probably none of us at this table, except maybe the youngsters, the town manager and the deputy town manager, most of us won't be here when this thing gets fully implemented. So it's a long-term situation. I think you can look at the Collins Center data that I poured over the other day. You can draw a lot of conclusions out of it. I think it's important that we draw the right conclusions from it. Thank you.
I just want to say one thing before we hear from all 5 board members, how many stations we think we should have in the future. That's not really, I think, what I was expecting to get out of tonight's discussion, but more identifying what do we need to look at from here going forward. And I appreciate, Chief, that you said you're not in favor of, just continuing to study it, because that just puts off the inevitable. But I think that your suggestion for a work group to get together, the Collins Center has already given us some more ideas about additional data to collect. And Dean, you're saying that there's a lot conclusions you can draw from the data. I was having a real challenge doing that, because, there's construction at Kelly's Corner during that time period. There were new staff who came on who weren't able to answer some of those survey questions because they had no reference point to the previous phase, because they just were hired by the town. So I do appreciate what David said about the apartment building on Powder Mill being online after the criterion study. But I think just comments about things that we want to do next, information that we need to gather, who are the stakeholders involved, rather than having the 5 of us weigh in on whether it should be 2, 3, or 4 stations. But go ahead, Pam.
With that, I actually had 2 questions, or maybe a comment and a question. And I'm not weighing in on the number of stations. And in fact, in looking at it, it seemed like very hard to pick out data that would support, when you're talking about response times, one model over the other. However, it did seem that the station plan does have a significant impact on staffing issues. You know, staff morale, staff needs, different staff models. So I guess I want to look at kind of those staffing issues and how do we sort of shine more of a light on those issues with a station model. So I guess that was more of a statement than a question. But my question, I do have one question, and the town manager said at the beginning that the report would be complete by the end of June. I'm curious whether you're expecting any major changes to what we're seeing now.
No, the only issue that is outstanding is on page 14, and it was just that there was some data point that we didn't think made sense, and so they were going to come back and discuss it when the person was back in the office later this week. So that's really it. I think this is as good as it's going to get for the most part. But there's a lot of good information in here, and I think people put a lot of time into this, and there's a lot of feedback from staff that we've already taken into consideration.
I just want to make a quick comment. I appreciate your comments about the staff. Staff is our most important resource, and we have to, it's not a traditional job. We live together, we work together, you know, we spend a quarter of our lives at a minimum in those stations. And finding ways to keep everybody engaged and excited about the job and things like that, it's really important that we do address those issues, so I really appreciate that. Firefighters don't join fire departments to work with a single other person. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for the camaraderie, building that trust, working together as a team, and serving the community to keep it safe. So thank you.
I just have a quick comment in that it's expanding the workforce. I think that sounds logical. Has the limitations on the geographical hiring helped at all, or that lift? And I wondered if you were always advertising.
So we advertise frequently. We're going to put out again. Currently, we just hired what would make up our 40th member. She started today. However, there is constant turnover. As you find in departments of our size, we are used as a little bit of a stepping stone. So we do have one member who's going to be leaving to go back to his old community. But we have that means we'll have 5 positions to get up to 11 members per shift. So we're in a lot better shape than we were at this time last year. We're doing well. The deputy has done a tremendous job sorting through applications, working with HR, and obtaining quality members who want to be here, who are excited to be here. And one of the things I think that has helped quite a bit is having an ALS engine. So that one of the things we hear is that, well, I only became a paramedic to be a firefighter. So we want them to be able to engage in both parts of the job. And that, I think we're the only department around that has an ALS engine at the current time. So that has been helpful in recruitment retention.
So I'd love to wrap this up with board members suggesting any specific items that you think that need to be looked at a little further. Also, you weigh in if there's some sort of direction in particular that you're looking from the board. I think that what I can see as important to continue collecting data on is the location where the calls are coming from as we have these new housing developments becoming occupied, because I think that will impact our ultimate decision about which stations and whether or not, heaven forbid, we need to move the one that's in South Acton. And then, as Pam mentioned, the staff assignments, because what I got from the report was that it was not clear that the impact on morale and trust and perception of safety was so dependent on the configuration or the number of stations, but it was more the staff assignments and getting people together who were working well together. So I would, continue to collect data on that, or just, you might not need any data because you can just, you'll hear if it's not going well. But any other things that you think that we should tell the chief and the town manager we need to study more? David?
So I just to follow on your point, I think one of the things that the report noted was there was a difference between a sense of community and morale, which I thought was very, very interesting. And they didn't necessarily move together, right? They moved a little bit independently. So I don't think I differ with my fellows up here on the board. It's going to be a really long time that we need several stations, even if the end goal is going to be for 2. There's huge advantage as to we're renovating the stations to having a spare station, right? And I think that what people have spoken about here in terms of staffing, with either renovation or upgrades or replacement of all the stations as they exist, that is such a huge number in terms of dollars, that it's very difficult to consider, in my mind, to consider staffing changes. And I would like to be able to consider staffing changes. And so in my mind, what a prerequisite to this is, beyond the study that we have now, is kind of a feasibility plan with some of the constraints like Dean mentioned, right? If it is not possible to expand Station 2 to be able to hold more firefighters at that location, we shouldn't consider that anymore, right? So I would like some kind of feasibility plan for what makes sense in the real world, and that then we can use that, the context of that plan, to make decisions. When things come up in town meeting that says, a station needs window upgrades or an HVAC upgrades or a new roof or whatever it is, that we have a context in which, the plan is to use this station for this purpose at this time, and we can it'll help us make those decisions as we move forward with the longer term plan to be able to accommodate the staff. And we just don't have that context now, right? And to me, that's much more important than some of the details in the Collins Center report, is to figure out that feasibility plan. And that's what I was hoping to get to in the next year.
Dean?
So I think the second half of David's comments basically stole all my thunder. I expect that there's probably quite a bit of information available right now from previous studies of the 3 existing stations. And I think it's important that we charge the town manager, and he can charge his staff, facilities director, and folks like that, to start compiling what we've got in the way of information already about those 3 stations, their physical condition, and even some very simple things like looking at the footprint that they're on. And looking at other constraints. For instance, we might say, gee, we need to expand the West Acton Fire Station, we need to put 5 people in there, but because of subsurface conditions, maybe you can't expand the septic system. And the same thing could be a situation over here on Concord Road. So I think it's important that, to second what David has said, get that feasibility study going as far as what can be done, so we know what we've got. I know there's some older studies that I'm familiar with. I think there's some more recent information that's been done in the last 10 years about the 3 existing stations, and start looking to see what we've got, assemble that, and put together a task force to look at the physical constraints of the buildings and As David has eloquently said, if it's impossible to do it, okay, we scratch that one off the list and start looking for another site. But I think it's important to look at what we've got and move ahead quickly. Simultaneous to that, I'd be interested to see if the chief has any particular ideas about modest increase in staffing sizes that could be accommodated within the existing buildings. And something that's not going to totally upset the apple cart as far as, you know, I know you can't just hire one firefighter and solve the problems. Do we need to hire 4? Do we need to hire 8? Is there some sort of a, and the town manager's thinking about dollars in his head right now, is there some interim steps that we can start taking? And I'd be interested to see that incorporated as part of the budgeting plan that everybody's going to be working on through the summer and early fall. Thank you.
All right, is there any other direction that you need from us, John or Chief?
No, this has been very helpful. We wanted to make sure to get this report out and then get feedback from you all, and we really appreciate it. And this we will publish this online once we take this draft stamp off of it. And as I said, it's really only that one page that we're waiting on.
I just want to make sure that I give the public an opportunity to ask any questions or share any feedback. John?
John Peterson, 6 Jackson Drive. First of all, let me thank John and the Select Board for enabling this study. Although it's referred to as a study, with my background, it's an experiment, and I love experiments. And of course, like all experiments, it started with an initial plan which needed to be modified. And so I also wanted to thank the chief, people in dispatch, all of the firefighters, everybody, who participated to make this happen. Having said that, there's been a lot of talk about response times. And why do we talk about response times? Because we think they're correlated with outcomes. But response time doesn't always dictate outcome. There are 2 parts to the response time. Something happens, there's an elapsed time, and then a call goes out. So I hope that when people look at what the outcome was in some of these cases, they'll be cognizant of the fact that maybe there's leverage in the time between an event and a call, which is more important and easier to fix than time between the call and the response. The other thing that I think is critically important in thinking about where the priorities should be is the question of what goal are we trying to accomplish? So obviously we would like to save structures, but as we know, structures can be rebuilt. It's dollars that we're talking about. It's not human lives or human health. And so, again, in terms of the responses, there are 2 kinds of responses. There are responses to, fires, that are really property issues, once people are safely out of a building, and responses to things like a cardiac event where timing could be really critical, or a broken arm where the difference in outcome of 2 minutes probably means just nothing. So I hope that, and of course I think this point has been discussed before, although we talk about fire a lot, most of the calls are medical calls. And I would hope that the response in terms of weighting those things, would look at the values that we achieve in those responses, not just at the responses themselves. Thank you.
Is there anybody online? Nope, okay. Thank you so much for coming in, Chief, Deputy Chief.
Thank you.
We will move on to item number 11, which is to approve the decision for SPSP 12/22/2025-496 Primrose Franchising Company, 457 Mass Ave. Hi, Nate. Would you like to give the board a summary of what went into the final draft decision?
Sure. I don't think there were too many changes from last time, just the conditions that we added in. We added in a blasting condition, just requiring that they obtain all the requisite permits from fire. There was one big update. We've been talking with DOT about their permitting process, and unfortunately, DOT is only allowed to permit one crosswalk across Mass Ave in that general vicinity, and there's already one there. So there won't be a crosswalk connecting the new sidewalk along the frontage, if that changes anything. And lastly, the applicant's counsel has gotten back to us, and he has no changes to the draft.
Thank you. One other note that I want to make sure that the board is aware of, because I wasn't sure if it was highlighted, was the condition that I had suggested for requiring the driveway slope to be a maximum 8%, which was the design standard from Mass DOT. And I made a mistake by saying that planning believes that it was possible to reduce that slope by lowering the site. It was actually our third-party engineering consultant, GCG. But the applicant has connected with staff and determined to leave that action to Mass DOT's review. So I'm a little disappointed in that, because that is, one of my top concerns is the safety of that access driveway. And now I guess maybe we should talk about the sidewalk and whether or not having a crosswalk will impact the board's feelings on that requirement. Pam?
I actually think having a sidewalk without a crosswalk can be more dangerous. So, because people will go to the end of the sidewalk, look to cross, there's no crosswalk there to give cars, a heads up that people might be crossing. So I would be very concerned about having that there without having a crosswalk.
David?
Do we know how much they would pay into the sidewalk fund if they didn't build the sidewalk?
I could grab my laptop.
That might be interesting, and the only reason I say that is, in my experience, the amount that's paid into the sidewalk fund doesn't go very far, right? It doesn't build us many feet of sidewalk, and we get way more sidewalk per foot per dollar when it's put in by the contractor. I don't know whether I understand Pam's concern, and I share that. I don't know whether DOT's standards and things change under any circumstances, or depended on how it was signaled. For example, is a crosswalk allowed there if it had a hawk signal? I don't know the answer to that. And I'm not trying to extend this out any, but I am interested to know how much they would pay into the sidewalk fund.
Just over $13,000.
Dean?
Yeah, I'm siding with Pam on this one. I think putting a sidewalk in there and not having a crosswalk is a concern, because obviously for everyone, they're going to expect that they're going to try to cross. And then, they'll be in an unprotected zone. I'm also concerned that if they say, well, no crosswalk, then we would not have a ramp, we would not have a proper handicapped access off the sidewalk and onto the street, onto the non-existent crosswalk, and then opposite that, there probably wouldn't be a ramp on the other side on Prospect Street. So I don't think that it really adds much value. We've got a good section of sidewalk directly across the street. Many of our roads only have sidewalks on one side anyway. And also, I think if eliminating the need for the sidewalk does give a much greater opportunity for the preservation of some existing vegetation and maybe some enhancements to vegetation, which I think will improve the site of the building. So I agree with Pam wholeheartedly on that. I do have one other point that I'd like to raise, but we can at least maybe come to some resolution on sidewalk first.
David?
So just a question, thank you, Nate, for the $13,000 number. How would a pedestrian get from the sidewalk in front of RJ Gray to the sidewalk that goes up next to the driveway in this process, right? Especially in the winter when there's snow. Do they cut through the woods from RJ Gray? Do they go down to the street and walk along the street? If we don't have the sidewalk go all the way to across from Prospect, should we at least require it between the driveway and the existing sidewalk?
It is. They had included a sidewalk from their proposed driveway to the RJ Gray driveway, so to the east of the proposed Primrose driveway. And then we had asked them to continue it on the other side of the driveway, west, to the end of the frontage.
Thank you.
I guess what I'm thinking is that if we have a sidewalk beyond, without a crosswalk, beyond the safety, the reaction from the public would probably be to badger us and demand that there be a crosswalk, which we wouldn't be able to accommodate. And also to Dean's point about vegetation, one thing that large tree would provide is shade for the outdoor play structure. I know that they've got some sails or some sort of shade structure, but a tree is definitely gonna cool things down and be even more effective than that, so. Do you wanna share thumbs up, thumbs down to remove the sidewalk requirement for the rest of the frontage? West of the proposed driveway. Thumbs up to remove, we okay with that? Dean, you okay with that? Okay. All right, so Dean, your other comment?
Yeah, we had quite a bit of discussion about, as you pull out of the driveway from Primrose, whether or not there's going to be a prohibition for left turns pulling out of the driveway. And at least my reading through the decision, we don't specifically note that. I didn't have a chance to look back at any revised site plans. Is that left turn prohibition still something that we're talking about? In which case I'd like to talk back about it. Or is that something that is going to be kind of left for the Mass DOT decisions?
So that was not listed in any of the text because it is on the site plan. I just hadn't been able to see it because it's so tiny on the plan. So that was GCG's recommendation, was to have no left turn out of the driveway because of the conflict with the junior high driveway folks turning right.
So here's a couple of thoughts that I've got in due respect to GCG. I understand that the potential conflicts of cars pulling out. And if somebody wants to make a left turn and there's heavy traffic on Mass Ave, I can understand that vehicles might stack up in Primrose's parking lot. However, if I work in Boston and I drop my child off at Primrose, and I can't take a left turn to go to Route 2, my obvious next move is go across the street, drive down Prospect Street, get to that recently renovated intersection of Prospect Street and Main Street, which is much better, but is still no real joy. You're basically taking all of the traffic or most of the traffic coming out of Primrose, and you're putting them down a residential street, Prospect Street, which people were concerned about, or you scoot them down Flint or Spencer. Then you get to the intersection of Prospect and Main, and then which way do you go? Okay, so I can turn right and go all the way down to School Street and get on Route 2 that way. Or I turn an immediate left, which is no joy at rush hour, and you end up going through Kelly's Corner. You just will have taken a 3/4 mile or 1 mile dog leg in order to get to the same spot you could have been to begin with. My thought is that if you're stuck there and you realize there's too much heavy traffic, I can't take a left turn, you should be able to make that decision and do that, but I go down Prospect. But I just don't think it's a good idea for us to mandate that everybody essentially has to go down Prospect Street and dump all that traffic, as opposed to keeping them primarily on a numbered state route.
Sorry, I think there might have been a miscommunication there. The only no left turn sign is within the parking lot for Primrose. It's not coming out of Primrose onto Mass Ave. But we could certainly provide municipal comments to DOT, depending on what the board thinks.
So GCG's recommendation had to do with the parking lot and not the access onto Mass Ave?
Correct.
Okay. So that was completely my misunderstanding then, because I thought that that was the recommendation from their review, which I wholeheartedly agree with, all respect to Dean's point.
Never mind.
Yeah, so we might not even have to discuss this, although I will say that I would consider Mass Ave a residential area because there's, multifamily housing between Prospect and Stop and Shop. And I was anticipating that folks would probably, if they were forced to turn right onto Mass Ave, they would either go down Prospect or they could cut through, the Flint, Spencer Tuttle neighborhood and come back onto Mass Ave, or they might decide to go up Deacon Hunt and go through Minuteman Ridge. So there is actually left turn out of this driveway onto Mass Ave.
We don't know for certain what DOT will require,
okay.
but yeah.
Can I just add something?
Sure.
There was a lot of conversation about driving and islands at our last meeting. And I think the no left turn was out of the TJ Maxx parking lot on Mass Ave, which may have gotten in the mix of all of that conversation, is what I remember.
No, that's not where my confusion came from. My confusion came from reading the GCG's report and thinking they were talking about onto Mass Ave. So, Nate, the only other thing besides my really significant disappointment about, I guess I'll just have to leave my trust in DOT to figure out what the safe thing is. But, kids walk to and from school, and people get impatient and frustrated, and they wait for the kids crossing at the crosswalk in order for the traffic to stop and turn. And I'm just very, very concerned about children getting hit by turning cars or cars crashing into each other. I wanted to clarify the number of parking spaces because condition 335 notes 46 spaces to be kept clear of snow. But I recall in a memo from you, maybe it was February or March, we were asking them to consider reducing that to 42. So I just wanted to clarify, is it 42 spaces or 46 spaces?
Currently on the plans, it's 46, but I do recall maybe just inquiring if they could reduce it, but they haven't indicated.
Okay, I think they said that they could go down to 42 if we required. But I just want to make sure that the decision has the accurate number, so it's 46. All right. Any other comments, edits from the board? You have a comment? I guess I'll take a motion. Go ahead, Fran.
So I'd like to make a motion to deny this application in its current form.
Is there a second? All right, no second to that motion, so I will entertain another motion.
Before somebody makes a motion, could I just completely understand here? We're deleting the condition for the sidewalk,
Yes.
which everybody agrees will return us to the default state of having the sidewalk to the east of the driveway and getting the $13,000 into the sidewalk fund.
Correct. And is that typically written in the decision, the amount that's to be donated?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would move that we approve the decision as drafted with the change of removing the sidewalk requirement west of the driveway. Oh, and I guess we need a bigger motion, don't we?
Can I go through why I want to deny?
Let's get through the motion.
Okay.
I'm going to have to prepare, Madam Chair, because we have 4 waivers in there, so you could take her comment if you'd
Okay.
like first.
It's long. So I'm voting tonight to deny this application in its current draft. The applicant is seeking a site plan permit under section 10-4, but the findings show they require massive deviations from Acton's underlying Residence 2, R2 rules. They are relying heavily on the Dover Amendment to build a large facility on the 1.41 acre parcel, overstepping the Dover Amendment protections. The application is asking for 4 major zoning waivers. I'm not going to go through the numbers. You can argue that the requested waivers are so extreme that they completely undermine the intent of the R2 district, and that denying these specific waivers is a reasonable regulation allowed under GL, the Dover Amendment. The scale of overreach. The project is 10,050 square feet facility where the R2 cap is 2,500 square feet, more than 4 times the allowed size. The floor area ratio is 60% over the maximum limit, 0.16 proposed versus 0.10 allowed. And the insufficient green space, the project fails the 35% minimum open space requirement, offering only 27%. While the GLC 40A, Section 3 protects childcare facilities from exclusionary zoning, it does not grant a blanket exemption to quadruple local density rules. Denying the extent of these waivers is a reasonable application of Acton's bulk and density regulations. The applicant has not proven that a scaled-down 5,000 square foot facility conforming closer to R2 parameters would make the childcare use unfeasible. Then there's the threat to the municipal water supply. Finding 2.1 notes that the 1.41 acre site sits within groundwater protection district zone 4. This provides a powerful objective environmentally for denial under site plan review criteria, which mandate protecting natural resources and drainage. The plan packs 46 parking spaces into a single massive parking cell. This represents an immense amount of asphalt and impervious surface. And in section 3.1.4, the applicant asked to skip a parking proof plan because they admit they couldn't meet its requirements without scaling down the project. Under section 10.4, the site plan review, the board must ensure the protection of Acton's groundwater by grouping 46 spaces into a single unlandscaped parking cell and failing to provide a parking proof plan. It has failed to prove that stormwater runoff containing automotive fluids will not infiltrate the Zone 4 groundwater protection district. The project should be denied due to inadequate environmental safeguards for the town's aquifer. And there's the high-risk traffic and pedestrian safety violations. Site plan review explicitly tasks the select board with ensuring safe pedestrian and vehicular traffic. The proposed site layout on Mass Ave presents a clear danger. Condition 3.3.11 explicitly references the R.J. Gray Junior High School access drive. This means the high-volume drop-off center will sit immediately adjacent to a major middle school traffic artery. And the massive peak hour incongruity. Childcare facilities generate hyper-concentrated traffic spikes during morning drop-off and evening pickup. The exact time school buses, junior high pedestrians, and commuters flood Route 111. I'm almost finished. Pursuant to the evaluation criteria of 10.4, the project introduces unacceptable traffic safety risks. The combination of a 46-space lot, intense peak hour drop-off schedules, and direct proximity to the R.J. Gray Junior High access drive compromises public safety on an already heavily burdened state highway, Route 111. Because the applicant requires a waiver from separating parking cells to fit this density, the layout maximizes vehicular hazards at the expense of student and neighborhood pedestrian safety. And let's not forget to mention exploiting the historical demolition conflicts. Finding 2.2 establishes that the existing single-family home is on the town's cultural resource list and is under an active historical commission demolition delay until November 14th. The applicant intends to demolish a recognized town cultural resource to build an oversized parking lot. And while the demolition delay is a general bylaw mechanism, the select board can find under site plan review that the applicant has failed to adequately preserve the historical site characteristics of the neighborhood. Approving a site plan that actively relies on the destruction of a protected asset before the legal delay period has even expired is premature and detrimental to the historical preservation goals of the town.
Thank you for sharing. I will accept a motion, yes.
I move that the board approve this site plan and special permit, subject to the recommendations, modifications, conditions, and waivers listed in the decision in the packet. In addition, I move that we, under bylaw section 6.7.6, we find that the proposed landscaping in sheet C10 is the most recent site plans to be sufficient. Under section 5.3, bylaw section 5.3.5, we find that the extent in the proposed plan, as the board finds that the floor area ratio, net floor area, and open space appropriate for the site use in the site in question. Under bylaw section 6.7.1, we find that the single parking cell containing 46 spaces is reasonable and that separating the parking spaces into two cells would unduly limit the use of the site. And under bylaw section 6.7.9.1, we find that the board finds that a parking proof plan is unnecessary to our review, given that the applicant would not be able to meet the requirement of the parking proof plan without significantly scaling down the use of the site.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Before we vote, are there any additional comments? Fran, I just want to say that I appreciate you bringing forward your many objections. I share most of them. I think that other than the fact that we have existing childcare centers in town that exceed those zoning requirements, if it weren't for that, I would have seconded your motion to deny. I think that this applicant is using the Dover Amendment as a shield to avoid, accountability. I am really, really distraught about the fact that traffic will be leaving from the junior high driveway, and after this project is built, a driveway that's 60 feet away, and the amount of conflict, potential conflict for vehicles and pedestrians is just more than I am comfortable with. And I also want to remind everybody that the project started by the applicant coming to this board for additional sewer units, and there was a negotiation, a memorandum of agreement that was made, and there's a contribution for infiltration and inflow work for our sewer system, which is really critical. There are a couple of subsidized childcare spaces. I do want to point out that those expire in 5 years. These are not 2 childcare seats that are subsidized forever, as long as this childcare center is operating. They expire in 5 years, and the applicant originally had agreed to more. I think the number was 5, and attempted to use those seats as a negotiating factor to have this board usurp the authority of the Historical Commission by limiting that or bringing the demo delay further. So I'm disappointed with this project in this particular location, although I do recognize that the size of it is perfectly appropriate for the buildings that are around that area, but the layout is not. There's not a respect for this community's values of historic preservation, for walkability, for the land. This site is going to be completely unrecognizable after almost all of the trees are removed and it's leveled and retaining walls are put in. So I just wanted to say that for the record. Sure.
The preschool that you're referring to, ITC, their lot is double the size. So they're on a 3.5 acre lot.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a clarification that since my creation of the motion was split, that I intended the sidewalk part to go with the second part. I just wanted to make sure that everybody, so I said the sidewalk part and then we stopped for a moment and then, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on that and we all agreed on that.
So we're including the sidewalk removal to the west of the site, Lisa.
Yes.
I think Nate's got that. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
And any abstentions? So that passes 3-2. Because I voted nay and my name is on the decision, I would ask David as the vice chair if you would sign the decision, if that is not legally problematic.
We can sort that out afterwards.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Nate, for all of your patience and back and forth with my misunderstandings. Appreciate it. All right, item number 12 is an update on the Town Hall HVAC and Emergency Power Replacement Project.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we are here to provide you with a quick update on the progress of the project and where it currently stands. As part of the ongoing review and preparation for final design, we have been looking at alternative systems. Right now, if you recall, there's 3 large air source heat pump systems or units that were designed for the building, and there's some alternatives in the field that are coming out in a very quickly changing field. So to make sure that we have the best project for the town, the most cost-effective project for the town, we're looking into that alternative. We're also receiving feedback from the Historic District Commission and the Design Review Board that has given us some things to think about in terms of the exterior enclosure. There's some buffer zone concerns with setbacks from the street and the currently designed enclosure. So because of those reasons, sorry, I just got close to the microphone there. Because of those reasons, we're working with Salas O'Brien and PMA Associates to do a review of what's been designed, alternatives that are in the field, and how we can pivot the design and incorporate those into the project. Another big component of town hall improvements is the bell tower and the countertop and finance. And we're also seeing how we can incorporate those into the project so that we could potentially bid them at the same time and have an advantageous price to the town. So right now, we've asked the designer to put a pause on completing design while we fully vet these options.
Thank you so much. I think it makes a lot of sense to pair the 2 projects together, and definitely looking for cost savings is a good idea. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Dean?
A question specifically about the emergency generator portion of the project. Has there been any thought given to the possibility, can you physically fit the replacement generator inside the existing footprint of this building as was the original design? It's going to be an ugly project to try to do it, but is there the physical possibility of doing that?
Thank you for the question. That's one of the pieces that we've asked the designer to look further into. If you recall, the prior design, it had both the generator and the air source heat pump units in one enclosure, which was making that a larger enclosure, and it was abandoning the current enclosure that we have outside the finance wing. What we've asked them to do is to look at the possibility of putting the generator in that area or the air source heat pumps in that area so that we can reuse that space and decrease the footprint that would be needed for the supplemental equipment. I'm sorry, you're referring to inside the building, Dean. I apologize about that. The generator that is there now isn't appropriately sized for the full building. So for us to upgrade, we would need to have a larger unit. And inside that space, it's currently behind the town clerk's offices that houses the old generator. We wouldn't have enough room to be able to put a new fully sized generator in the building.
Thank you.
Pam?
What impact do you think this pause or this work will have on the overall timeline for the project?
Right now, we're anticipating that the first impact will be on moving out of this building into whether it be Conan or a different facility. That we're looking towards an October move out potentially, so maybe a month or 2. In terms of construction, it depends on what the look of that bid packet looks like, if it includes a bell tower and or the countertop on the finance wing. That would create a longer construction timeline. Right now, it's not totally clear what that looks like, but we're looking about a 1 or 2 month pushback at this point.
Do you have a question, Fran? I have a question about the bell tower renovation. Will the bell be coming down during that project?
During the construction, the bell will be coming down. What they have to do is remove the entire the entire unit, the structure, remove that, put in new beams to structurally support a new structure that will go on top. And to do that, they'll remove the bell and the components to it, and then they'll bring it back up.
Okay. I had a question from a member of the public wondering if there would be any sort of public programming around that, the opportunity for folks to see the bell,
We can definitely look into that.
unless it's going to be put on a truck and taken to a secure location.
We can keep that in mind. We can definitely will.
Thank you for the update. Next item is to review the draft facility use policy for the Asaph Parlin House.
Thank you for attending the ribbon cutting we held on Friday in the 90-degree weather outside. It was a well-attended event, and it was a great beginning to that facility and how I think it'll be a great amenity for the community. As a new facility that's becoming available, we need to make sure that there's structure in place for how it's used. I think there's a great opportunity for the library to use it for some of its programming and staff to use it for its programming, but in order for it to be really a community resource, we need to have some policies around it. So Tom's going to walk us through what we have as a draft and how we came up with it.
Included in your packet this evening was a draft building use policy for Asaph Parlin, and a couple of different notes on how this was generated. We utilized some policies that are already in place, mainly the facilities department's policy on room usage. And we utilized some of the language from the recreation policy for the pavilion usage as well. And that's what generated this draft policy in front of you. In the first section, we worked to identify who would be eligible for room reservations, whether it's, we called out 3 different areas, whether it's the inside of the building, it's the porch and lawn area, or it's both combined. We focused on town departments, boards, committees, whether they're appointed or elected. And then we incorporated a second group of possible permit holders who could utilize the facility. And those are organizations that are community service organizations. A couple of the examples are the Boys and Girl Scouts, the Garden Club, Acton Minutemen, support groups for town agencies. That's left a little vague on purpose. That could be a consulting firm working with the town on doing community outreach. The past years, we've had a few help out with the zoning bylaw changes. That would be a great space to hold some community outreach efforts. Some design outreach, whether it's for complete street programs or it's for a facility renovation. Cultural events that are open to the general public. We called these different groups out as eligible for potentially being able to utilize the space with possible fees. And a little bit more on that later. The nice thing about this structure or this building is that it doesn't require keys. We've put this building on the swipes that all the buildings are on now, so we can either provide fobs for entities who will be utilizing the building on a repeating basis, or we can schedule it. The facilities manager, Dan Louette, has the ability now to be able to schedule usage in each building, open it up 15 minutes before, have the doors locked 15 minutes after. Reservations are now done either via email, but we've also transitioned room reservations at Town Hall and the Public Safety Facility to online. There's a link on the Facilities Department page that links right up to a schedule that allows you to submit room reservations, and we would push this building onto that platform. We included liability insurance requirements. This is after conversation with our liability insurance provider. They've helped us identify proper coverage for contracts and also for room reservation and facility usage, so we've included that here. Of course, it depends on the type of organization. If you are part of the planning board, you're not going to have a certificate insurance available, or if you're the garden club, you may not have the ability to obtain the insurance coverage that high. So that would all be as part of a conversation with the town and the room reservation. Prohibited events, we tried to keep this as as open to the community as possible without identifying specific groups. mainly for-profit organizations, religious or lobbying purposes. That's some of the prohibited usages. Prohibited activities include the typical no smoking, alcohol consumption without prior approvals or licenses, violation of bylaws or select board policies, and so on. And then we put into all the policies for room reservations in the need that there is, say the select board had to relocate for a meeting into this space, then the town manager would reserve the right to relocate an organization or a group that's reserved this room to be able to accommodate that need. And then usage fees, we identified the possibility of carrying fees over to the permit holder to cover costs associated with providing that service, whether it's overtime for staff, electricity that goes into an extensive usage, cleanup, whether it's through staff or it's through our janitorial contractor, or other unexpected expenses that the town would incur. So this is a draft policy. I'm happy to answer any questions or make edits for you.
Any edits from board members? Dean?
Yes, under the prohibited events, talk about not permitted for-profit organizations, religious or lobbying purposes. My question is, would one of the town, either the Acton Republican Town Committee or the Democratic Town Committee, be considered lobbying, or would they be an allowable user of this facility?
That's a good question. That's not one that we fully vetted out, I believe, unless the town manager has.
I'm just trying to think of what we mean by a lobbying. Yeah, we could probably figure out a better way to say that. Those specific cases, I'm not sure if do they ever use our town facilities?
I believe that each of those committees have from time to time used space at the Memorial Library. Because their room use policy is somewhat different than that for the town, so that's my question.
Yeah, I think theirs allows a lot more, that, you could run that you can do things in that space that we hadn't anticipated allowing in this space. So if that's something you wanted us to look into further, we could. Otherwise, I guess we would interpret that in this case as not allowed.
I know both those organizations are always looking for meeting space, so I figured I'd ask you the question so you can think about it for when they ask you for permission.
So I think as dean, that it would be nice to be able to offer that, maybe not as a consistent meeting place, because in the winter, obviously, it's not appropriate. But I think it's novel, and I think people would enjoy doing it. I don't like the word lobbying. If Green Acton were allowed to meet there and they're trying to convince us to use less salt on the roads, is that lobbying? I would say that it is lobbying, right? So I don't, and I think that's perfectly reasonable for them to discuss using less salt on the roads as a private organization, right? So I think we'd have to figure out what that means. I think there should be a little bit more discussion around what that is. Also, I'm a little concerned about the fees being not set. It used to be up until this year that users of NARA put down a deposit, and which was refunded if there was no damage to the pavilion or anything. I don't know whether that's possible and that it should be no cost with a deposit. I'm not sure what the solution is there, but I think, if it costs, are we going to charge the scouts $50 to meet there? $25? We're not going to tell them till after they meet, right? I think we need to say that And I would like to see it done by whether you're going to use the inside facility, the outside facility, and how many people, right, or something. I also think this needs limits as to the number of people, right? If an organization of 50 people wants to meet inside, I think we need to say no, right? So I think we need to say that the facility can accommodate up to 30 or 35 people or whatever it is inside, up to 70 outside, or whatever the limit you think is appropriate. And maybe some circumstances where we always charge or never charge, right? If people use the outside, maybe we always charge, because there's the possibility, I think, of damaging the lawn, leaving trash around, things like that, that we have to deal with. And I think that's less of a possibility inside. I mean, there are sometimes people that meet in the library or in town hall that are not strictly town-sanctioned groups, that they don't damage the groups of room 9 or room 126. And I think if they wanted to meet inside there, and I think that should be allowed. And we just need a fee schedule, which was, I think it should be upfront. Because also upfront means that it's not discretionary, right? If we charged the Boy Scouts $25 and didn't charge Green Acton, or vice versa, why is that, right? It's, to me, if they're going to have 25 people, they should get the same charge, with whether it's $0 or $25 or $50 or whatever it is. So I vote for consistent fees, and maybe some way of recouping money if there is damage to the facility.
Fran?
Is there an official capacity for that building? Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Oh.
It's in the 40s. It's in the 40s, yeah.
46. 46.
That's what I remember. I agree that we should have a fee schedule, but I don't think it needs to be part of the policy. I think the policy can be for these types of uses, these types of groups, there's no charge, and for these others, there may be a charge, and then the fee schedule can be separate. I think that's how the existing facilities, there's a facilities use policy, and then there's a fee schedule that's a completely separate document. So we could just, work that out and then incorporate that into the existing facilities fee schedule, maybe. I know that there's a limit to the number of people that can be inside the building because of fire and building codes, but I'm a little hesitant to have a limit on the number of people outside, because if the Friends of the Acton Libraries wanted to have a book sale on the lawn there, how are they gonna keep track of how many people are at the sale? And I don't think that should be limited. I think that there should be a note, and it doesn't necessarily have to be part of the policy, but maybe the fee schedule. There should be a note about alternative parking locations, so that if folks are planning to use this space and there's some other event, either at the Red House or at the library, then they can communicate to the group attendants that you can also park at behind the Center Fire Station or other locations. Because it could be a challenge, depending on what else is going on. Would a Friends group be considered a support group, like Friends of the Arboretum, Friends of Nursing Services, COA? I'm just wondering what support groups for town agencies is practically.
So I think this is a unique space because every other space that we let groups use, with the exception of the picnic pavilion, is a building that we're also in. So if there's a group that wants to meet in room 9 during town hall, when we're all here, and no one else is using it, and it works out, that's fine. But this is a separate building that I think it needs, we're trying to find a way to recognize that this is a different use and it's going to have different requirements. And custodial, we're not going to clean the building every day, only when there's something that happens in there. So if something that happens there causes us to have to clean it, do we want us to pay for it or should the user pay for it? And regardless of if it's Boy Scouts, Green Acton, or anybody, if they're causing us to clean that building when we won't have to do anything otherwise, I think we should figure out whether or not there's a custodial fee that we charge everybody, which I think is the practice for the picnic pavilion. And then there's tiers of rental fees that we could also look at, like someone may want to have a wedding over there. For example, we have a lot of weddings out front. I walked into one the other day by accident when I walked out the town hall. Someone got married last Friday, I mean. So I think this is good feedback. We're gonna take anything else you have to give us, and we'll bring back this policy. And Tom had been working on a fee schedule, kind of based on the picnic pavilion one. It needs some more work, but I think the feedback that you've given us tonight and anything further would help us be ready to bring this for approval next time.
Okay, that's helpful. I definitely think that there should be a fee to cover we shouldn't be incurring costs for folks to use this. My question was mostly, I didn't understand what kind of group would be considered a support group for town agencies. You gave a few examples, but I was just wondering about a friends group. I have a couple of other questions. Do we charge, or not charge, do we require insurance policies for the other facilities in town, like the picnic pavilion, for certain groups?
For certain groups, yes.
Okay. And then I had a question about the I don't know if it's prohibition. Yep, the adhering any object to any painted surface. I think we probably would want to say even the beams, like most of the inside of that building is not painted, but we don't necessarily want folks sticking thumbtacks or nails into the beam, the hand-hewn 1860 beams that are in there. So that would be a suggestion that I have to expand that a little bit. And then finally, this is not something I'm terribly feel strongly about, but the redlined part about the, sorry, can you scroll up to the redline part? The second phrase there, the general public may request usage. I think that it would sound less awkward to me for it to be may request usage and may be subject to facility use fees instead of to possible facility use fees. Maybe not less awkward, just more clear. You might not get your usage granted, your request granted, and you might be paying a fee. Any other comments from board members? David?
The scouts are the last people to be concerned about cleaning up. I just thought I'd add that.
So just a couple of ideas. One thing that might have to do with the fee schedule, if they intended to have food in the building or anything that might make a mess, right? If it's the Republican Town Committee and they're just talking, that's not that messy. And but if they're throwing their holiday bash, that might be messier. We might want to have in the policy what months the building is open concerning weather. You know, that it may be April to October or whatever you think is appropriate. We could open it more than that on, you know, if we have a particularly warm March or November, but we might want to have, in case I'm planning my wedding for next April, and I want to, you know, or I want to have a tax day celebration on April 15th. I can do that. And I'll differ with Alyssa a little bit. I think we need some limits as to the space. We shouldn't be planning a wedding for 350 people for this space. I understand Alyssa's point completely that there are some things like the book sale or some fair kind of events where people come and go and the total attendees may be too many if they all came at once, but they don't all come at once. Because we only have so much parking and that kind of thing. So I don't know, it seems to me that we want to have some kind of guidance on size, even for events where, like a book sale where people come and go.
And the last thing that I'll say is I think that Democratic, Republican town committees, they should be able to use this space. So I would support the removal of the lobbying and maybe even religious, because we might let a religious organization use one of our other facilities, like the rec center for some sort of event or the picnic pavilion. So I'd be in favor of fewer restrictions on types of uses. Pam?
For that matter, if one of our local businesses wanted to have something for their employees, like a little special get-together, they wouldn't be able to do it here because they'd be for-profit. So just to throw that out.
I think, and I think this is our first go at it, so I think we want to get something that works, and then we can always amend it or advise it. But I think what we mean by for-profit is you can't have a timeshare meeting there and try to sell timeshares. I mean, if you want to have, if the timeshare company wants to have a holiday party, we wouldn't, I don't think we'd look at that the same way. So thank you for the feedback, and if you think of anything else in the meantime, let us know, and we'll be back to you at the next meeting.
Is there anybody online who wants to say anything, or anybody in the room? Public? We're having very little public comment tonight. All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is approve temporary installation of boulder or sign in front of 526 Mass Ave.
So through some grant-funded programs, our Director of Public Works, Corey York, has designed with community input West Acton Village streetscape improvements, but we've had trouble securing funding. It hadn't risen to the top of prioritization for local capital, and the grant applications we've submitted weren't hitting. So we have a plan, we just don't have funding. In the meantime, there are a couple situations that we're trying to address, and residents that live in the village are very concerned about delivery trucks parking and even just people parking, because it's a busy, vibrant place, and they want to be there. So I think it's good to have people want to be in a village. I think we should encourage people attending and visiting our businesses, but when someone can't get out of their driveway like this, it's a problem. So and Corey, the Public Works Director, agrees with me on this. I think if we put a sign right there that said, no parking, I'm not sure if it would stop that truck from doing that. So I think one thing we came up with as an interim measure is what if we just put a boulder or something at the end, not on the street, obviously, but it's hard to see from this picture, but the curb, the edge of pavement ends, and this truck is off the pavement. It's on what could be grass, but it's mostly just dirt. So I think what we're talking about is putting something there, just at this location, because this is the one that's become the most frequently raised as a concern. And I've talked to Corey about, what about plow trucks? Is that gonna mess up anything? And he said, no, there's obstacles all over town. We'll just have to be careful of it. So that's what we're thinking. We don't put stuff in the right of way without permission of the select board, so that's what we're asking for.
Is this the driveway to Gardner?
No, this is,
It looks
this
like
is
it's
directly
after
opposite the cheese shop.
Right, that's the driveway to
No, this is, if you're coming up the hill, this is on the left before you get to Gardner Field. It's
Oh,
right next
really?
to Gardner Field.
It's right next to the wall.
Is it
It's a
next-
wooden
there's
wall,
another
right?
picture below it.
So to the left is the fence for Gardner, not wall, fence. And then to the right is the condominium. I think there's
Oh, okay,
4
yep.
units in that building.
Hopefully that's not these people's cars.
So thank you for bringing this solution to the board.
This maybe it doesn't give you much better context, but if you can see the building across the street, you can maybe see, that's True West.
That's True West, yeah. So I just drove past something similar today, and the boulders weren't really large. They were maybe just a couple of feet tall instead of like 4 feet tall, and there were a few of them in a row, and they weren't round, so they didn't look out of place. They looked like they had been there for a while. They didn't really look like they'd been there for a while because they were in a row, but is that something that is going to stop the truck because it's so high off the ground? Or do we really need a giant boulder that looks like it was dropped by a giant?
We haven't spec'd out the size yet, but it's generally something that we want people to be able to know. We don't want people to damage their cars. So we want people to see, big enough for them to see it. And the idea is that they avoid it. And if they do need to pull over, at least if they do so, it'll be further up the road and not blocking these people's driveways.
David?
So I'm in favor of the boulder. First of all, we have a lot of boulders left over from 53 River Street. So there's plenty to choose from. And I'm not in favor of the sign, because I think that off to the right-hand side of this picture, there are some spaces there that should be parking. There should be on-street parking. It's in it's in the streets right away. It's public space, and there should be parking there. So I don't want to start setting the precedent that we're not going to allow parking there. But I completely understand that people need to be able to see to come out of their driveway, and they don't want part of their driveway blocked. And people shouldn't be parking on top of the curb, in the dirt area. So I like the idea of the boulder.
Move to approve the boulder.
Second.
Any further discussion? Anybody online saying thank you? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to Director York. Next item is year-end update on the FY 2026 budget. Exciting.
Yes, it is. So we do a budget preview in August, which we typically give a recap of what happened in the prior fiscal year and a preview of what's coming. We decided to start even earlier this year and give you a preview of the closeout of the fiscal year. So we have some good news and some not bad news, but interesting news. I'll start with the interesting news. I think we had pretty good, as you know, we did an analysis of our health insurance. Budget Director Ellie Anderson really dove into year over year what we thought we were spending, what we were budgeting, and we recognized that it needed to be rebalanced. So we rebalanced it, and we only increased our budget next year by 2.25%, even though we got a 10% increase. So we knew that we were going to get a turn back in health insurance this year. We do. It's in the range of $400,000 to $500,000. We knew that was coming. We also knew that due to vacancies from people retiring and leaving and normal turnover in an organization, we had additional funding left over there, which is probably another $300,000 to $400,000. So that sounds like a healthy turn back, right? But we had a pretty vicious winter, and we actually overspent our snow and ice budget by $800,000, which in a year, like if we did that next year, it would be more concerning than this year because we had that extra funding available in those two accounts I just mentioned. So in the end, the net turnback will be around 100,000 probably, which is not bad, but typically we're closer to 1%, which would be around 350,000. And so we're below where we like to be, but it's because we had to absorb a huge hit from snow and ice. We did get some news from the state. They did approve $100 million for winter cost overruns for cities and towns, but 80 million, we'll only see a portion of 80 million of that, and that portion will be given out to communities formula-based in the same formula that we used for Chapter 90. So I don't think we're not going to get 800,000 from it. I think we'll get some amount, but in any event, we'll end the year in a positive position. It's just not as positive as it could have been. The other good news is that we are $1 million over our revenue estimates. We brought in $1 million more than we said we would in the recap. Primarily, $500,000 of that is motor vehicle excise. We brought in $500,000 more in motor vehicle than we projected. And then the rest of it is building permit fees. We had a couple big projects like Powder Mill and primarily Powder Mill. That was a huge project. That brought in more than we expected. And then our investment income was $380,000 over projections. So those aren't budgets that we really want to increase too much. We don't want to project investment income. So having it coming over is okay, but it doesn't mean that we're going to change it next year. But we will take another look at motor vehicle. I think we should take another look at what we're projecting for motor vehicle. So some good news there. So in the end, when we do our free cash certification, there's a lot that goes into it besides what I just described. But sort of what we're looking at today is at least $1 million back in the mix towards free cash, depending on other variables. So that's the update. I think there were a lot of things that we had to do. Our legal, one thing I want to mention is legal. Our legal budget is overspent a little bit, and it's primarily because of litigation over a subdivision in South Acton. It's really been draining our resources, legal resources and staff resources. So hopefully that's over soon. And anything else that we wanted to know? I don't think so. But that's just the update. So we're in good shape, and we're able to absorb that big hit on snow and ice because of some other budgeting measures that we had taken.
Thank you for that update. Interesting news. I have one question about the overage on motor vehicle excises. Am I correct that this is the second year that's happened?
Yeah, I think it's happened the last few. I think we were cautious. We have to be cautious when we're projecting revenue. And we have continued to be cautious with motor vehicles because we thought maybe people wouldn't be buying them as much, but they have been.
Any other questions from the board? David?
How often does motor vehicle excise go down, right? As people are squeezed a little bit more financially, and, we've had recessions or other things in the past, has excise tax gone down? Or does it always go up and it's either a little bit or a lot?
We have that data in the budget. I don't have it in my head, but I can get back to you on that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. And we will go on to item 16, which is to approve reappointments to boards and committees as listed in the memo dated June 10th, 2026. Dean.
There's one edit that needs to be made. Under community preservation, we've got Jackie Saltzman listed as an associate, and she actually is a full member and has been for about a year.
Any other changes? All right, I have two changes. We are, well, actually, is Annie listed on here? No, she's not. So Cemetery Commission, Joe Will should be reappointed as an associate member at the Cemetery Commission meeting on Thursday. They did a little shifting because we have two new members coming in. So Joe, per our policy, has graciously agreed to step back to an associate member so that our two new appointees can be full members. So, Lisa, do we need to actually add Annie as an appointment? We just appointed her as a cemetery commissioner. So her term, should we do that next meeting, July 6th? Okay, let's do that. So just changing Joe to associate member. And then everything else is correct? Okay. So I will accept a motion to approve the appointments as edited. Reappointments.
So moved.
Second?
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. So now, yes, Pam.
I'd like to just take a moment to recognize the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, which did a lot of work in reaching out to all of those committee members who had terms expiring the end of this month.
Thank you. They do a lot of work at this time of year, and we appreciate them. All right, so moving on to consent. Item 17, approve intermunicipal agreement renewal with Regional Housing Services Office. 18, approve disposition of surplus property. 19, approve meeting minutes from May 18, June 1, and June 8, 2026. 20, approve one-day wine and malt license applications. Dirigible Brewing Company at 77 Powder Mill Road on June 26, 2026. Carol Barron at Nara Park Picnic Pavilion, 25 Ledge Rock Way on July 19, 2026. Miriam Lezak at Nara Park Picnic Pavilion, 25 Ledge Rock Way on August 23, 2026. Household Goods at 530 Main Street on October 21st, 2026. Item 21, accept donation from Sandra Hines for $300 towards the Juneteenth event celebration. Item 22, approve appointments to the following boards and committees. Melissa Wingfield to the Acton Housing Authority, tenant position with a term to expire on June 30th, 2029. Tom O'Neill as an associate member to the Cemetery Commission with a term to expire on June 30th, 2029. I will hold that item. Kathy Watt as a full member of the Recreation Commission with a term to expire on June 30th, 2029. Stephen Trimble as an associate member to the Community Preservation Commission with a term to expire on June 30th, 2027. Rebecca Harvey as a full member of the Agricultural Commission with a term to end on June 30th, 2029. Item 23, approve appointment of Nina Pickering Cook from Anderson and Krieger as Town Council with a term to expire on June 30th, 2027. And item 24, accept donations towards the 2026 Summer Concert Series and special events. Acton Ford for $3,000, Pesce Network, Duncan, and Jimmy John's for $1,000. David.
Move to approve consent items 17 through 24 inclusive, except for the second sub-item under item 22.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, that passes. So the second, what did you call it? Sub-item? We need to approve the appointment of Tom O'Neill as a full member to the Cemetery Commission with a term to expire on June 30th, 2029. And I will move that. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, and I am going to follow up on Pam's thank you to the VCC by saying a huge thank you to all of the volunteers who have agreed to continue their service to the town of Acton and also these new appointees. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed and abstentions. All right, one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed, any abstentions, passes unanimously. Good night.